Good morning or good evening stateside. Thanks for being here, guys. G'day, Bruce. How are you? Come on, you're late. I'll do dusters later. I'll have to contact Ted and actually ask him, can you please supervise me? Sheena, good to see Taurine. Get your mind off the stuff. A hello, how are you, Harry? Or, would be nice. Oh, Vivid Mouse. Oh, you've got a new look, mate. A new mousy look. Impressive. I like it. I think it's better than the other one. Yes, got character. Yeah, she is trying to. My favorite subject matter. Justice, how are you, mate? Yes, they are. 17. You guys been here? God, I was just getting out of the shower at that time. God almighty. Shave, go to the toilet, do all that sort of stuff. Like a manic idiot. I went to bed. It was after, I can't remember exactly. It was slightly after 2. The last time I looked, it was, slightly, what's a couple of minutes here or there or half an hour? God. Yeah, I know. And I've got 2 live streams. Yeah. I'm pretty good at doing shit like that to myself. G'day, Bruce. He feeds it to his pets. We need to find a way of getting Harry to 5, then 10 subs. That's clip channels, helps exposure, smart cookies, but thinking hats on. Yeah, it would be good. But it's been a bit of it's been a slow journey, let's put it that way. It's been a very, very slow journey, and I've got no idea. There's a whole lot of people just get on YouTube and seem to explode. I seem to struggle all the way. So, yeah, don't know what I'm doing wrong or maybe right, or no idea. Richard, absolutely no idea. But tried a whole lot of things, even with Llama. We've tried, with the short little videos and trying to change the hashtags and all sorts of things, and changing my descriptors and going in and changing some of and it just sort of seems people accidentally find me, or they find me via some other channel where I've been interviewed, like on Joey's or on Pim's or Bart's or stuff like that. So it's a hit and miss. I don't know why I'm, maybe I'm unimportant to YouTube for once, but I've had less demonetized videos or issues with videos being demonetized. I've had a lot of videos that have basically been put on like a warning type demonetization, where I've had to claim, well, you're wrong, and they've reversed all those decisions, but I did lose the momentum in a sense, and that's annoying. And then I stopped doing that for a while. I started basically just putting them on like a scheduled thing for a couple of days, and and when they did bring up, like it's not suitable, I'd basically make the claim, and they would reverse that within 1 day, where before they would take a whole week, and then I'd basically make it go live. I'd publish it. So yeah, there's an annoyance once you've on hold for 7 days, then they basically immediately respond to it. That's very strange, within 1 day. And because there's no arguments really, they couldn't argue, because my videos have got all their studies linked. The stuff that I'm saying is my opinions based on research and that my interpretation, understanding of that. So it's not as if I'm basically putting out any fake news or anything. So they can't justify it on any of those grounds. So basically all they just do is try to trip me up. Maybe it's all the COVID videos that I did. I did quite a lot. There's a whole playlist. And maybe because at the time, I think that really did affect my channel quite severely, like a lot of other people were affected with the COVID stuff. And I'm still sort of paying for it in a sense, but literally had to remove a whole lot of stuff and put them on Odyssey in order to try and actually, reset his whole channel. And yeah, anyway, it's annoying to say the least. I shouldn't have to take all my playlists of my COVID stuff down. They're still valid. People have still got problems out there, and bloody annoying anyway, just because it goes against their narrative. Anyway. Yes, well, we all died from scurvy a couple of years back, so we're just ghosts. I used to love salads. I don't know why, but I used to, really make interesting salads. I'd put a whole lot of seeds in them. I'd put basically certain dried fruit, and I made it with a lot of spices and a sort of a vinaigrette type thing, and so I made them very tasty. They didn't taste just bland leaves, so to speak. But the amount of damage, oxalate, and whatever else they did to me, no thanks. And on their own, without all that masking of their bitter taste, they taste like crap, basically. So, yeah, let alone the little hooks in the fibrous sort of tissue can do a bit of a number in excess amounts on your colon. Yes, and remember, Paul Mason with that video that he did specifically pointing out these issues. G'day, Lukey. So we know that it's contraindicated, and when people take it off completely, their remission it was a small pilot study, obviously, but it did show, a change completely from having symptoms to no symptom. These were people with severe IBS and many other issues. So we need to have long-term studies and bigger groups and all that, but who's going to fund it? Nobody wants to fund it because it goes against the narrative and a lot of business interests. So that's not going to happen. So that's all we've got at this stage. Most American cows eat lots of salad. Nowadays they do. If you go back 100 years, they didn't. There was, even in the recipe books, there was hardly any salads. It was a very rare thing. It was just a fashionable upper classes that used to do it, So, but yes, because I'm vegetarian. But the majority of the average people didn't. Let alone it was very costly. Nowadays they do them in hot houses all year round, pumping them with CO2 to grow them. So and with refrigeration, they're available all year round. That's pretty much it. But back then, yes, I agree. Yes, a lot of brainwashing, and they do target women. Yeah, it's like they really know their target market. Target women that tend to have those are more empathetic because they give they birth the next generation. They have to have that strong empathetic nature to care for the young and all that, and so they tend to be more vulnerable to these sort of messages. So yeah, it's unfortunate, but their own strong, caring nature is being used against them to push misanthropic dietary and social behaviors. Yeah, unfortunately. That's the world we live in. Gary, how are you, mate? Good to have you here, mate. Need to set up another Zoom session, mate. Probably next week, at some stage. Probably get on and have a bit of a chat. And anyone else that wants to come on. G'day, Deborah. Good evening, good morning, Harry. Yes, depends where you are in the world. That's true. Stateside, yes. Oops. Oh, thank you. Jenny. So many years and they still haven't corrected that StreamYard thing where it just runs and goes haywire. My message, unimportant. Yes, it is. Very much so, very much. Put a big, massive wallpaper. Let me just see. Has they were supposed to sort that out for me last time. Is it going to work? Sometimes will it work? Yeah, there you go. The big ball. The no BS ball right behind. Or I can put one of Hobart. There's Hobart, the waterfront. We'll put one of Hobart. That's the waterfront. And I sort of live somewhere up there in a suburb, which is close to, it's 5-minute walk into the CBD, into the boundary of the CBD, which is Warwick Street. Anyway. So, a new look. G'day, Loki. Gabrielle, can't sleep without carbs. What's going on? You're probably not eating enough protein to get enough tryptophan and things like that, or you've got some underlying derangement where your insulin is, for some reason, quite elevated. And, we're not talking about like massively elevated, but slightly running at a higher level, which is what it's doing is negatively affecting gluconeogenesis. And by negatively affecting gluconeogenesis, it's making it much harder, and sort of carbs sort of correct it, but they don't fix the underlying problem, which is, you may have to go really strict for a period of time in that regard. Also taking a bit of, so what's your blood sugar levels in the evening before you take the carbs? 91. Okay, so it's not that low. That's fasted. Yeah, well, fasted. Okay, some people usually run them much lower than that. Let me just check because I always forget the different sugar conversion. Come on, calculator. Was it coming up? Okay, 91, which is 5. Yeah, that seems to be for fasting, seems to be a bit on the higher side, because usually when I'm fasting, mine's 3.7 to, which is, let me just do the conversion. I'll actually put on the screen. There's a converter that I use. And I'll share my screen. Sort of increase it. I think that's clear enough. Yep. So 91 is 5 millimoles. This is a system we use in Australia. I know that that's the system they use in Greece. Not in most of Europe. They use the millimole. In Greece, the US, and a few other countries that use the American sort of. But anyway, so in terms of milligrams per deciliter, this is millimoles per liter. 5 is that equivalent. That seems a bit on the higher side because usually mine is running at that. And I've actually shown mine before. I'm not going to grab my phone again now. And the highest I've had is 77 in a fasted state. So that seems a bit on the highest side. Like there's something that's, because if you're in a fasted state, you should be at that much lower level, technically speaking. So if you're running slightly higher glucose, when you're eating, you'd be running even higher, raising insulin, impeding gluconeogenesis, and affecting, that the way that actually works. So in that regard. Now, there is a bit of a trick to bringing down blood glucose throughout the whole day and forcing insulin to sort of subside over time. And that's with taurine, because taurine will force lactate through the Krebs cycle. It will not allow for any excess glucose or in terms of lactate or any other precursors to be recycled back into glucose. So it usually forces it and suppresses and lowers blood sugar levels, taurine. So sometimes actually doing a bit of cutting out all carbs, upping your protein and your fat, so you've got energy coming in, and then suppressing cortisol, because cortisol also, you may be running high cortisol because of blue light exposure. That's another thing, So, I've got blue blocking glasses and stuff like that in the evening. And if you're running higher cortisol, you can actually raise blood sugars and keep them up much higher. Some people do. They may be more stressed. I don't know, Gabrielle, what situation you're in and what your life's like and all that. But that's another, high cortisol, running high cortisol could be an issue. You may be not getting enough protein to provide the nutrients that actually can normalize cortisol. So there's a whole lot of things usually is people just under eating protein. I find once they eat more protein, it usually resolves the problem. But if it's not that, we can always correct that and force cortisol levels to a lower level. But you need to then look at a whole lot of exposures. Have you got any stresses in your life? And that's not only basically like family pressures, but environmental exposures that could be stressing your body, like putting a lot of strain on, like pathogens, chemical exposures. It could be a lot of things that could be driving your stress levels and pushing up your cortisol levels and pushing up your blood glucose levels. So, and then you've got, because you get the bit of the overcorrection by slightly insulin, but you've still got that elevated cortisol level. It's sort of, you have these ups and downs, which really causes sort of irregular sleep patterns. So there can be a lot of derangements. Sometimes, people that have had COVID and had long COVID symptoms, they can actually end up with insomnia and stuff like that. And it's usually a bit of damage to the endoplasmic reticulum and to the ability for the sort of mechanisms in the body to work properly in protein transcription, and also the functioning of the mitochondria can be impeded. So and that's another issue in itself. So I don't know whether you've been exposed to COVID. So that could be another issue that could be, and one way of dealing with that is vitamin D and moving up from the standard that I recommend, which is about 5,000 IUs up to 10,000 IUs for about 6 months or more, and taurine levels up to 10 grams, but you have to pace yourself slowly you don't go rapidly up to, so your body can adjust, because it is an osmolyte and does regulate fluids and minerals. So we need to adjust slowly, not rapidly. Stuff like that. There's also side effects in people who are taking lithium or other blood pressure meds, or meds in general could potentially. We don't have research. We only have for lithium, and there's anecdotal for some others, but it's not very clear. So you literally have to take it slowly, see how you react, and then make adjustments to your meds downwards in the dosage. So there's a lot of things there to unpack. But if you basically, I don't do consultancies. I used to. I just don't have the time. I've got a day job. If you need to consult with somebody, I would recommend Bart Kay. He's a good friend of mine, and I usually direct people to him for those sort of things, and he could coach you through these sort of things and check things out and try different combinations and stuff to resolve this problem for you. I'm giving you some general information now. It's not medical advice. It's not meant to, it's based on my own research and knowledge. So it's basically, you have to look into that, and then, maybe do some trial and error stuff and see how you go. Anyway, I'll stop sharing that part. Yeah. Oh, you think you may have got COVID? Yeah, it's a potential thing. It's the two biggest things, like energy zapping, and it does do some damage. If Lukey, can you put Bart's consultancy link into the? I can't remember if it's L. It starts with LI something or whatever. Bart's consultancy thing in the actual chat box for Gabrielle. Yeah, so yeah, potentially COVID is an issue. That's a big damn issue. And one of the biggest, I've done a video actually on that. You do check out my video, and I've actually covered that about the sort of if I know I'm taxing your time, Lukey, sorry about this, mate, but if you could also put in that COVID video where I actually talk about, or maybe I should find it myself, pull my finger out and find it. I don't know which one it is. Let me find it. Yeah, thanks, Lukey. That's the one for Bart. And I'll find the video because I know exactly which one it is. So Lukey doesn't have to search trying to figure out which one I'm talking about. And I won't share my screen. I'll just put it up on the... What is it doing? What? Well, that's nice. YouTube has actually decided to remove my playlist for the COVID stuff without even telling me. How nice of them. So efficient. Bloody hell. And then they wonder why people get annoyed with Google. Oh, God. I'll have to send another complaint to YouTube asking them, why have you removed my playlist on COVID? I wonder why. Frustrating to say the least. Yeah, that's it. Post-acute COVID-19 syndrome. Oops. That's the actual video. And so that's the actual video that covers all that sort of stuff. So check it out. And I'll try and resolve the playlist thing for the anyway. Salutation. Can't say anything on this channel, can I? You said that. Did I? G'day, Zach. G'day. Good to have you here, mate. Yes, yeah. So, as you said, further down, yeah, you've had an exposure which potentially could have actually mucked things up inside your cells and cause some of these. Sven, how are you, mate? Big thanks to Harry. Been following your advice for 3 years, and as a 58-year-old male, it takes that long to get my health sorted. You are so right about patience being for 50-something. Cheers. Yeah, it is. Look, my cardiovascular things before I recently, as you guys know, I got discharged by the cardiologist. But to actually resolve that, it took me 12 years. It takes time. We're not like rat studies show quicker resolution when you take high doses of this or that or whatever, like some of the taurine stuff and some of the other interventions. But they live only 2 years to 4 years, depending on the rat type. And they are mechanistic studies that sort of elucidate that this should work in other mammals. in that regard. It's not dietary because they have a different diet to us, so we can't get advice from on that. But it does, and it's not, a perfect, because their physiology slightly works a bit different. But some fundamental things, some fundamental pathways, they still have mitochondria, that all these things do work the same way. So that does have some bearing that we can extrapolate from that. But it takes longer because we have a longer turnover and a slower repair system. It's just the way we work. We live longer, but these things, our metabolic rates, our energy production levels are very different. All these things do have an effect. But I'm glad you're on the mend and doing better. Good to hear. Pro4X, how are you, mate? Yeah, taurine's going to be definitely the vitamin D, because we need to also improve the immune system. We need to get some naive T cell production up, and we need to get them into the cells and start clearing out some of that stuff. So we need to basically, and we need the taurine to go in there, heal the endoplasmic reticulum around the nucleus that has been affecting protein transcription. So we need to fix that part. We need to also repair part of the Krebs cycle and the electron chain that also, all these are being impeded, because what happens is it actually forces the cell into reverse Krebs cycle. This is what COVID does. Nasty little bugger. It's not only deuterium that does this overloading, but also COVID is a nasty little bugger that actually plays havoc with our immune, because what it's trying to do is trying to force the production more of lactate. It actually feeds on glucose and lactate, the little buggers. So what they do is they undermine our own energy production to serve their own interests. So, yeah, problem. So we need to basically suppress their behavior in the endoplasmic reticulum, where it all really begins, and because that's where they're transcripting themselves, and that's where we need the taurine. That's where we need also the mechanisms to the cellular type defense mechanisms to be supported, to be able to clear that stuff out. So that's why we go for those slightly higher doses, up to 10 grams, but we pace ourselves, we step ourselves, because it is an osmolyte. It regulates fluids in the body and all that. We want people to transition and adjust their fluid homeostasis without disrupting it as well, because I don't know what other people do, because they do a whole lot of things. So, yeah. Anyway, maybe I should do a standard protocol for these things. This is what you eat. This is how you take probably should. Anyway, like a lot of things that I need to do. What do you think about the shingles vaccine? I actually did that a couple of years back. And I did do some research into it, and it doesn't seem to... There was one study, I believe, that I found that it does... Certain people seem to react. They didn't know exactly why. There were two theories. One, genetic, because it's such a small group. And the other thing, some other potential, maybe environmental factor or epigenetic factor. They just couldn't work it out. But it wasn't like anything severe. The other thing is that there may be other viruses in the body that may be interacting and may be causing some of these issues. There's a lot of hypotheses, but they don't really know. But in the overwhelming majority of people, 99% of people, no reactions whatsoever. So you've got to be really unlucky in that regard. So, so I don't recommend things, simple as that. But I did it myself, and I would do it again, basically. So I don't have a problem with this actual vaccine. It's a standard vaccine. It's not, and it's gone through efficacy of a couple of, I think it went through some countries 4 years, some countries 5 years, I think. I'm not sure whether in some countries it went beyond that. That was all I was able to find. So I stand corrected if people believe that in their country, the trials were done for 6 or more years. Unlikely, but it could be the case. And in some other countries, it may have been done for a shorter period of time. So that's a possibility. So it can vary. Different agencies, different countries, different policies. So, but as far as I'm concerned, I didn't have any deleterious effects. And my friend that actually did it as well didn't have either. So pretty much that's all I know. That's all I can say about it. And I've got no information out there other than that it's a problem for people. mRNAs, viral vector ones, these sort of things, DNA ones, they were actually used in oncology for many years and with disastrous side effects. And then they were used for COVID recently, which we're seeing a lot of, issues. So I'll leave it at that without demonetizing myself. But yeah, those are a very different class. They're therapeutics. They're not standard vaccines. Vaccine is a very different thing. It's, compared to the traditional notion of a vaccine is a deactivated, virus. What they are basically producing with mRNA and all that is something completely different. So, something we've never put in our bodies other than as emergency authorization. And also even under the cancer usage, it was under emergency authorization where they would say to people, you could die. So here's your option. You either take this experimental stuff or not. So, and some people did. And they had catastrophic failure after 2 years. And I've done a video on that. I'll restore my playlist once I sort out YouTube, and then people can go. I'll make an announcement anyway that playlist has been restored once it gets restored. So I'm peeved off big time. Anyway, damn YouTube. Anyway, let's move on before I say any more expletives and I definitely get demonetized. Or have the video taken down, even worse. I'm seriously considering a career change. Okay. Interesting. Working on WA-NT border, confiscating fruit. Are you really? I know you were doing those, because you were doing all the rat tests and stuff like that in that clinic and all that. But now they've actually got you confiscating fruit, vegetables, and honey. Would be a dream job for a carnivore. So, would be great. Bloody hell, Gary. Sounds interesting. Yeah, I think they give you a baton with that and a gun. Why not? Why not? Have fun, mate. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you. Yeah. And I hope you're well as well. We stressing about work? If you want to chat with me at a later stage, let me know. It's caused by fiber. Exacerbated likely. You guys. The Vagoons would love yous. You'd be great party people at a Vagoon gathering. Artificial doesn't work well, Harry. We need sign writing comps to do backdrops you can hang. Really? Really, Richard? Friggin' hell. Well, that's what I used to do. That's the only way of eating this damn stuff. When I was doing my keto days, you couldn't eat the green shit. Oops. I said the word. Hope they're not listening. We first covered all that. What are my thoughts on tomatoes? If you're going to eat them, I wouldn't personally. The nightshades, they do have a number of anti-nutrients. But if you're going to eat them, get rid of the skin and get rid of the seeds. That's where most of the problems are in the tomato. But it does have some fructose. It is a fruit after all. It's not a vegetable, but a fruit. And it does have some fructose in it. Not a lot, but it does, it's got a lot of water in it, fluids and stuff like that. That water tends to be a bit high in deuterium because fruit does concentrate deuterium. All fruit does. So, but it's not excessive like some of the other fruit. Like if you get something like a peach or a pear or something like that, that probably, or anything very sugary fruit will have far more deuterium. Tomatoes have got less, but still, they still have more than meat or fat. So just keep that in mind. But a small amount to use over meat for flavor or whatever as a dressing, as part of a dressing, yeah, fine. I don't have a problem with it. It's only a small amount. But if you're sensitive to stuff like that, nightshades or whatever, probably not. But it is contraindicated for a whole lot of reasons I pointed out. But, as I said, I'm not here to basically judge people or tell people how to eat. I do a mostly carnivorous diet. I'm not always strict. But at the end of the day, all I'm here is just to call out the bullshit, tell people what is indicated and what isn't. I drink coffee. That's not indicated either. That's, got anti-nutrients. It's, it's got a bit more niacin if you have the granules, but it also oxalate. But so you do get a bit of a niacin thing there. It's probably one of the best sources of niacin within the sort of plant world that you could actually get in that regard. But at the same time, there are other issues with it. But I can 4 times faster at detoxing caffeine out of my system. That's why I just drink it for the taste. I don't drink it because I get a buzz out of it. I get zero buzz. If I want a buzz, I'd get on Zyban, which was an antidepressant that I used to get off smoking. That really gave me a buzz. Kept me up all night. I had to go for long walks to get out of my system. But that's when I realised what druggies feel. You can be completely in depression and take something like that, and you can, what depression sort of thing. But that's just masking the problem. It's not resolving the problem, obviously. It's not the way to go. Destroy your life. You don't end up with longevity under those circumstances. But, yes. Anyway, I'm babbling. No. It's associated nonsense. There is no way of tell me the mechanism. I always say to people when they say, "Oh, tomatoes do this, or this polyphenol does that," and I go, "Show me the mechanism. Show me quite clear a mechanistic cause and a sort of an effect. I take this, it has this effect on this pathway." I mean, I know taurine will actually fix ATPase, which is complex 5. So if you damage that, you reduce your energy production, which you can revert the cell into a cancerous state to survive, a primitive state, running the old program with oncogene activation. But I know that if I reduce the deuterium 2H in the system and put taurine to correct and melatonin, overnight better sleep, blue blocking glasses and all that, and correct the electron chains and lift oxidative phosphorylation and restore proper cellular energy function, you reverse all that. And you also reverse the reverse Krebs cycle to switch the other way. So you reduce the growth factors. You impede that system. Because taurine does another thing on the Krebs cycle. It forces it in the other direction and also forces lactate through the damn thing to basically produce energy. So there are quite clear mechanisms proven in research. This is just associational crap. Most plant so-called anti-cancer things are just absolute wanks. Crap. They've never demonstrated in any literature other than associated relationships, which is, healthy user bias, basically. People that are not eating a whole lot of crap and eating this sort of stuff more than others. So it's just nonsense, mate. Absolutely nonsense. Exactly. Precisely. You guys, my regulars are really up to date, which is good. I've done a 4-day fast, drinking water only at night. I sleep faster since 2017. The last month, something changed, and you mentioned it further down. Yep, we sort of covered a lot of that things. Yeah, there are compounds in all plants that have negative effects on cells. Now, some people call this hormesis, and I go, no, I call it bullshit. And people are sort of supplementing in high doses some of this stuff to get hormesis. And I go, aren't you getting enough hormesis in life? Exercise stresses the body. That's hormesis. Your kids, they'll give you hormesis. They'll stress you. Your work colleagues may stress you. They'll give you hormesis. So do you need extra? I don't think so. You get more than enough stresses to basically give you robustness. You don't need to add to the stress levels. There is, a dose dependency. Too much stress will cause problems. So I can't understand why hormesis would actually be a benefit. It's just nonsense. Yeah, exactly. Lukey gets enough hormesis from his job. He doesn't need any more stress. Any more stresses. Yeah, so is Lukey. He's Brazilian as well. He's dry fast, yes. Yeah, I've done 3.5 days and then pulled the pin because can't remember the reason. I think I mentioned it last time, something that there was something happening that I had to stop because I was going to have a barbecue. There was some thing, and so I didn't want to basically just stop a dry fast and immediately. I just wanted to basically transition in the evening, eat something, very light and all that, get my sort of function or my digestive system working again properly. And then so the next day when I was going to stuff my mouth with a lot of meat and stuff like that, it wasn't going to cause me a whole lot of issues. So I was planning for 4 days, but then my brother decided, I think it was Sean, decided to do a barbecue, I think. It's a while ago. I can't remember exactly the details. I'd have to go to an older video to remember. Must be age. Or maybe I had a couple of veggies this morning and it caused me brain fog. Oh, that's right. I haven't stopped I'm still in a time restricted feeding state. Okay, I'm still not awake. Yes, they are. They definitely are. They definitely are. But you can actually reduce the lectins with basically getting rid of the skin and seeds. That's where the majority of lectins are in the tomato. And then with a bit of dairy, you can actually bind it, a bit of cheese. It's probably why the vegetarians in the past, in the 50s and all that, in the low Melinda, because I remember I did the blue zones, the bullshit. There's a playlist of blue zones, and the one with Grundy that went to low Melinda because he was a cardiologist working out of there, and they showed him the dietary thing. 50% was dairy. So it was nearly 60 to 2/3 animal foods and 1/3 plants back then when they did all those studies. They don't do them now, do they? They always refer to that old 1950s study. I wonder why. Yeah, exactly. Bullshit. And, back then the milk was less processed, had more lactoferrin, which is a lectin binding compound in milk. So you eliminate the skins, you eliminate because back in those days they used to get rid of the skin and get rid of all the seeds. Everybody used to. Everybody knew that there were anti-nutrients in those things. You had to get rid of them. In the modern era, everybody basically leaves them on. It's a health food now, the skins and the seeds. And you go, okay, you guys are really weird. You've lost the plot. So all that past research on anti-nutrients is just completely ignored. Yes, modern world, modern eaters. Yes, they know best. No wonder they're so healthy compared to those people back in the 50s and 60s. And what are deuterium? You need to look at my videos. That's what you need to look. And there you go. It's a heavy form of stable. It's a stable form. It's heavy water. It's a stable form of hydrogen. You basically got 1H and 2H, which is what deuterium is. So your standard hydrogen 1H has a proton and an electron orbiting in a hazy form. We won't get into superpositions and the quantum haziness. And pretty much 2H has a proton at the nucleus and a neutron. And it's the neutron that makes it double the weight. And it's the neutron that causes the problems. It's too large. It can't get through the nanomotor that's rotating at 9,000 RPM. So your complex 4 in the electron chain, rotating really fast. And when you get too many neutrons going through, it slows it down and then busts the motor and it won't work. And then you need taurine to go in there and sort of repair over time with melatonin helping to repair that's where blue blocking glasses, taurine to amplify, melatonin in the evening can all help repair the electron chain to restore more youthful oxidative phosphorylation levels of energy production. So yes, deuterium is nasty in high amounts. We need some in our body. It does play other roles, but too much is a problem. Oops. Thanks, mate. Appreciate it. How much peak 2 would I do daily for somebody with osteoporosis? We're doing 5,000 IUs, 15 milligrams of Keto alone with heaps of protein, fat, sunshine, salt, weight bearing exercises as well. And are you getting enough calcium as well? I haven't done this video, but look, there are genetics. If you've got a pastoral background, if you take high dose of peak or K2, you can actually induce a lower serum calcium level. And with a lower serum calcium level, it can create a few issues in the body, including a bit of a tachycardia and stuff like that. So we've got to be very careful with higher doses. That's why I usually recommend the 5 milligram rather than the 15. And even with the 5, if you're taking it constantly over a very long period of time, you need to make sure that you don't have the genetics. I've got those genetics, unfortunately. My ancestors were pastoralists, so they consumed a lot of dairy. And when you consume a lot of dairy, you actually downregulate a specific gene, which I can't remember off the top of my head at the moment. I'll do a video on it. But what happens is people from that background tend to have poor absorption of calcium. So while our ancestors were fine in absorbing calcium, like from meat, when they had a lot of meat, they got a lot of calcium, and getting vitamin D helped bring in more calcium from the meat. But if people in the last 10,000 years have been on a pastoral diet, their genetics have slightly altered. And it's a bit like, the Irish with the retinol that's down-regulated to buggery, and that's why they can't convert carotenoids very easily and need actual retinol itself, because they consumed so much cod liver in the past. So this adaptation that happens, these localized adaptations that happen to domesticated foods that we've consumed, do change our requirements slightly. So your calcium requirements, if you have those genetics, and I don't know, if you have any symptoms at these higher doses, you'll know. And I would stick to 15, but the actual highest amount for dealing with this condition was 45, 3 a day. So the research basically shows that 10,000 IUs of vitamin D, 45 milligrams of menaquinone 4 were being used. This was in the studies that were done in the Netherlands and the studies that were done in Japan. They did not use MK7. They used menaquinone 4 because they know that is the one that directly affects, and it also interacts with the genetics, our genome. So yeah, most of the other stuff's pretty good, but the only thing may be an issue, maybe the calcium, serum calcium. We don't want to get too low. Can cause some homeostatic derangements in the bloodstream. So you got to have like more potassium, magnesium inside the cell and more calcium and sodium inside the bloodstream. So it's just the way it is. Our bloodstream is more like ocean water, which is calcium, sodium rich, so to speak. So that's the sort of just letting you know the bit of the difference and why that evolutionary origin exists to be like that. So keep an eye on that. Monitor your symptoms and potentially try and increase your calcium intake from foods, whether they are sardines, bones, that is, or bone broths. Doing more regular bone broths would be a good idea as well. And also, I would also try and some people have issues with, I understand, have issues with lactose and can't drink milk. Then there's always the option of using, just cheese. Some people seem to be fine with cheese, and you can get good levels of calcium, actually even higher concentrations of calcium in cheese. So I would go up to the max of the RDI. Plus with a high meat, you should be pulling slightly above that. And if you've got those genetics, you should be getting then more than enough. So it's just sort of precautionary principle, Sven. That's basically it. I don't know what your ancestors are. You probably know better than me, because obviously, you can ask your grandparents or parents, and did we herd animals If you herd animals, I suspect you would have drank their milk and their, cheeses and all that sort of stuff, yogurts and whatever. And so you probably may have those sort of genetics. It's quite a lot, Central Asia, Mongolia, most of Europe, probably 2/3 of Europe people tend to have these genetics because we consume. It's the reason why there is such prevalence of osteoporosis amongst Europeans. They've probably got this gene. My mother suffered from osteoporosis. My father suffers from some issues and all that. They both would have the genes because I've got the worst, which means I got from both. They must have had either both just as bad or at least one of the alleles. So they gave, or one of them would have had both of the alleles. One of them would have one of the alleles. And I got definitely guaranteed that I would have got the worst sort of situation. So I can't keep, I have to take in dairy if I'm going to maintain good calcium serum levels and also get enough in, because most of it doesn't get absorbed. It's just my genetics. And a lot of people in Europe, and it's probably the reason why the prevalence of osteoporosis is much higher amongst Europeans than other people. So, they've probably got these genes because of our exposure to dairy for a very long time. So that's one thing that people that have got a dairy culture background need to keep in mind. Anyway, I've switched to remote work so I can buy a farm, leave my metropolitan neighborhood somewhere near cattle ranches that I can buy those beavers and raw milk dairy. Yeah. Look, good luck to you, Blake. I hope that everything works out for you. So, yeah, I live in the place that I live in is maybe the capital of Tasmania, but its population is about, the Greater Hobart area is pretty much about 200,000 people only. And this side of the river is about 120,000. And the bottom part, which is the CBD and the sort of, is even less. It's something like probably 40,000 or whatever. So generally speaking, I don't live in a place, and everything's close. Farmland is close. Wilderness is close. I mean, you've seen me walk up the hill and it being a reserve, a national, actual in wilderness, and walking through wilderness into the mountains. And it's just 15-minute walk up the hill. So, my sort of environment is Tasmania is probably very much regional, semi-rural in nature. It's definitely, I could not live in Sydney or Melbourne. No, thank you very much. I didn't like Athens. I liked the nightlife as a youngster, but not living, nah. And what do? They commute for hours, 2 hours going to work, 2 hours coming back. You just basically commute, sleep and eat. That's all. What a life. No thanks. I can just 30 minutes away driving out of the city and you can go fishing. I know people like friends in Melbourne, they travel for 4 hours to get to a good fishing spot that's clean, no pollution or whatever. And then 4 hours back, that's 8 hours. And they only are there for 1 hour to fish. You've already spent 9 hours just for 1 hour. And if you don't catch anything, it's a bust. And I can go half an hour down here, stay for 6-7 hours, fish, then come back for the same amount of time. So completely different, and usually don't even stay that long. It's usually we time our fishing and we know our fishing spots, and it's pretty much about 3 to 4 hours. That's it. So yeah, completely different lifestyle in a more rural, even better. I've lived in a small town in Greece on the west coast, 50,000 population at the time. It's 100,000. It's doubled now, but back then it was 50. In the early days when we first got a bit over 50 it was, and then eventually through the 80s it actually grew to about 70 odd thousand, and then we sort of left at that stage, and because there was a just massive boom in the town. It just constantly, they were just building one, multi-story building after another. It was just ridiculous how they were going up. There was a lot of work, let's put it that way, for construction. It's just, it was just like boom, boom, boom in building things. But it was still, the back of where we first were living, there was just farmland. Just walked out, you'd go back, and there was paddocks. So it was completely different. A couple of villages further down that I used to go with my bicycle, completely different world. Yeah. I tried living in a big city, and I just couldn't. I just don't like it. I feel like I'm caged in. I've got no real freedom. I'm not talking about freedom to blabble. I'm talking about freedom to be able to move naturally as a human, to be able to move around where I'm not confined. So yeah, I understand how you feel, mate. Completely understand how you feel. What do you say? My ancestry is North European. My dad's family ate many fish, but my grandmother was from the reindeer herding Laplanders. Okay. I've been doing 2 cups of made by cow milk daily. Okay, that's good. That's fine then. If you're getting in some dairy and stuff like that, and I suspect if you're doing that, you're probably getting some cheese and all that. Yeah, it's not going to be a non-issue. I'm just concerned that a lot of carnivores tend to basically don't do dairy at all. They just go, I'm not doing dairy. This sort of paleo nonsense that's still around. Yeah, if you can tolerate it and you've got genetics for it, fine. If you've got leaky gut, fix the leaky gut and then go back onto dairy. But, it's not an issue for for a lot of people that have got ancestral genetics for it. The benefits of working in nature seem to be completely outweigh any office work. For now, I just go outside and ground on my breaks. That's good. Yeah, look, I do a bit of that myself. I'll go to a number of places in the city that are like park areas and stuff like that, and I'll take my shoes off and just walk, on the grass, or lie down. So now that it's becoming warmer and warmer, I'll do. In the winter, it's a bit problematic, especially if you're an office place. If it's not a cold day, I'll take my shoes off, I'll take my socks off, I'll walk and just pull up my trousers slightly so I don't get them, any dirt on them or anything like that. And I'll just walk. I know people may think I'm crazy. I don't care. That's their problem. And then I'll just go. There's usually a tap at the it's the second entrance of the park there that I go to, and I'll just wash my feet off, put my socks on, dry my feet. I usually take a towel from work, put it in my pocket, dry my feet, and then put my socks on, put my shoes back on, and basically go back to work. I know it's weird, but whatever. I don't care. Yes, sounds bloody good. 4 more years, I'll be 60. I'll be able to retire. I'll be able to consider these things. Intel, good to have you here, mate. Fruit, low anti-nutrient concentrate in their seeds, high fructose, high deuterium. Yep, that's the fruit tends to be lower in anti-nutrients. The animals really want you to eat the fruit, so you can defecate around the place and release the seeds around the place. It's a smart strategy. But yes, it is high in fructose and high in deuterium. But it can be used for seasonally to increase your fat stores, because if you can reverse your Krebs cycle and force growth factors and try and force the fattening up of the animal, seasonally fatting up, you got better survival. So it's not a complete negative, but all year round, definitely a problem, So, and when you're doing it constantly, you just end up doing so much damage to your body, in terms of energy production, affecting all that. Yeah, I sort of, I'm thinking about a lot of things. I mean, I'm going to be doing the next couple of years, I'll be doing some coding for work, that is. And I'm thinking that, once I retire, maybe, I don't know, put myself out for coding for other companies or organizations while I live in the tropics. So I've got a lot of thoughts. I've got a thought about starting up some business over there as well. We'll see how it all plays out. It's a lot of plans, but plan A, B, and whatever. But yeah, I've be trying a few things out and seeing how they work. There are some. So you probably have the genetics of an ApoE4. So 4, 4, 3, 4, 2 tend to be hyper responders. I understand the need for more lipoprotein boats for fat transport, and hence more VLDL. And yeah, exactly. Yeah, subsequent. Yeah. If you're offloading a lot of energy from VLDL, you're going to end up with far more LDL. It's just the way it is, Because basically every single VLDL that gets exported includes a bit of cholesterol in it. So the body doesn't know how much cholesterol you'll need, basically. So, it doesn't know how much every cell will take. Other cells have more damage or have more needs to turn over part of the cell, or repair part of the cell, or whatever, and have different requirements for cholesterol. So what the body does is it says, okay, we don't know exactly how much. It definitely needs energy because there's no glucose around. And so, okay, we'll put a bit of cholesterol in there in every single boat, and we'll put in also a certain level of triglycerides, and then we'll send it out as VLDL, and it will circulate around in the body. And as it goes into every cell, it just basically shrinks into an IDL, intermediate density lipoprotein, then eventually down to an LDL, a low density lipoprotein. So, and it's really coarse. It just shrinks into these different sized lipoproteins, and eventually then gets recycled and goes back. And as long as it's not oxidized or damaged in any way or glycated or whatever, it usually doesn't have its receptor in any way, the ApoB 100 receptor sort of damaged. It usually can be recycled very easily back through the liver. But when people, and if let's say you've got a virus, you've got an infection and all that, those cells will take up more cholesterol. So when you've got a virus, a cold, and you do a test, your LDL goes down. Sorry, your cholesterol goes down, your measured cholesterol. Why? Because it's being used. So the body doesn't know exactly what the requirements are going to be. So it's got a standard package. That's, and when your energy is coming directly from, triglycerides, from fats and stuff like that, you're going to be exporting more of these vehicles, more of these boats, and you're going to end up offloading this cargo because you're not using glucose. So you've got to use all the triglyceride, all the fats out of these boats, and these boats will shrink down, and all that will be left is a bit small amount of energy and a whole lot of cholesterol if it hasn't been used. If it's being used by the cell because it needs it for reparative reasons, or the immune system needs it to, fight off a disease, fine. Your cholesterol will actually go down levels, That's why people, when they get viruses or stuff like that, their cholesterol goes down because the LDL is being used and recycled more rapidly. So the circulating boats go down. When you're healthy and you've got no problems and all that, the circulating levels that are left over after energy has been offloaded are going to be much higher. That's basically all it is. It's not complicated, but it just requires a bit of lateral thinking and less reductionist thinking. Unfortunately, most people just think in linear reductionist ways, and they don't understand the dynamics. You're putting energy in there. You're going to offload the energy. You've got a standard package. This will shrink. That's your only energy source. So what's going to be left over? More LDL. Surprise, surprise. I mean, how thick do you have to be not to understand that? But that's the sort of medical fraternity that, they don't get it. All the good brainwashing that the pharmaceutical lobbyists and the media have done for many years. But, that's sort of how it all works. That are the dynamics of energy transportation in the body. It's a beautiful thing. Controlled by our genetics, transcription, and all that. Now, obviously, a person like me who's got an ApoE of 3.3 will take up chylomicron remnants much slower as a consequence of those chylomicrons, because they only circulate chylomicrons that come from the gut wall that bring in fats and stuff like that. They only circulate around the body for about 10 minutes. Unless you've got some sort of derangement, and then they can stay in the system for a bit longer if your liver's, let's say, stuffed. But generally speaking, they'll be uptaken. Now, some of them will go to the adipose tissue, and they'll offload some of their energy, and then the rest will basically go back as they'll shrink as they go through different, providing cells with energy. Then and other nutrients, fat soluble vitamins, and all the other stuff like. VLDL also includes fat soluble vitamins and things like that. So all this sort of stuff, then eventually it will go back to the liver, but it will be uptaken much slower. So it means that you'll have these remnants circulating for much longer, and that's another thing they say. High remnant, you probably heard it. High remnant chylomicron circulating. That must be a negative thing. No, it's not. Your uptake is just slow. If you eat a lot on a carnivore diet or a keto diet, a lot of fat, your uptake, your adipose tissue, depending if you're a thin person, you've got less fat cells to actually uptake some of that energy. So you're going to have more circulating chylomicron remnant, and it's not a negative thing. This is another bit of bullshit that lately is being floating around. It's just basically that you've got genetics. That means less receptor sites on the liver to take it up and then re-export it out as VLDL. It's the same sort of energy, more or less, in the body. The body maintains homeostasis. If you've got more chylomicrons, going to have less VLDL and LDL. If you've got less chylomicrons, you're going to have more, it means that you've taken that up because you've got more receptor sites in the liver. You've converted it and re-exported it much more rapidly into a different vehicle. So it's like think you're in a depot, that's your liver. The trucks come in, the chylomicron remnant, offloads the stuff into another truck, which is the green truck, which is the VLDL. But if the laneways coming into the depot are much smaller, which is an ApoE of 3.3 or 2.2, the trucks, the red trucks of the chylomicron remnants will stay in the bloodstream for longer, and they'll take longer to get in, and then it'll take longer for VLDL to be exported because they have to wait until enough trucks have come in, offloaded their stuff, filled up their trucks, the VLDL trucks, to send them out because they don't have enough stuff, cargo. Got it? So that's how it works in a sense. It's not a complex thing. As long as, things don't get deranged, oxidized, lipid peroxidation from seed oils damaging these lipoproteins, they're fine. It's non-issue. They're just basically little transport trucks that transport stuff in an environment where you've got things which are hydrophobic, that you can't mix fats, and fluids and water. You try mixing it in, it's really hard to mix into water. So they have to be in this package, which is, hydrophilic on the outside and hydrophobic on the inside, where all the fats are and stuff like that. It's just the way it is. So ingenious design, and that ingenious design is controlled by information in these genes that tell the body exactly what to produce for your specific genetics. And the only reason why you may have an OP, you may be a hyperresponder, is because you've got genetics of a person, your ancestors consumed very little carbohydrate. And ancestors that consume more carbohydrate have got adaptations of keeping chylomicrons out of the liver. Why? Because we don't want too much. We don't want to cause inflammation in the liver by having a lot of fat and a lot of sugar being processed in the liver at the same time. That's the reason for these ApoE type of genetics, which control the receptor sites and how much you take up and how much the liver can tolerate or deal with. This is why people with an ApoE of 4,4, which is the ancestral, the chimps have it and all the other, and early humans had it. Most tribal populations are very high in ApoE4, tend to take up things really quickly, which is a really big problem if you're in the current food environment where you get extreme Randall cycle activation at the liver level and highly inflamed at the liver level as a consequence. That's why these people are much more inflamed, much more susceptible to Alzheimer's and all these other inflammatory diseases. So really, it's not, people getting it wrong. They say, oh, these people should be eating more carbs. No, they should be eating less or zero. They actually can tolerate it even less. Most of the tribal people, like the Samburu, the Sand people of the Kalahari, the Bushmen, most of their genetics are 4,4. They're not designed to basically be pulling into the liver sugar and fat at the same time in large quantities. That's why those protective mechanisms came in, to basically keep fat, chylomicron remnant that you ate, out of the liver until other things could be processed at a controllable, manageable pace. That's the mechanisms, how these things work. It's an ingenious and great design, but unfortunately most people ignore it, or it's too complicated for their feeble minds to understand, and come up with reductionist gobbledygook and nonsense, and then just give you reductionist solutions. Take a statin, take this or that or whatever, which is a mitochondrial poison. One thing after another. Yes. They got a bad thinking and then solve it with contraindicated toxins. Fantastic. The world we live in. Oh, thanks, mate. Yeah. Probably because of their Spanish background, those genetics, some of, there are pastoral, also, there were Burkas, the North Africans that came into the Iberian Peninsula, and some of their genetics, and they are sort of camel milk drinkers and stuff like that. So there's dairy component there. So where you got the genes, I don't know, but yeah, or where they got the genes, but yeah, more than likely from those sort of sources. And it's quite rocky in parts of that central part of the Iberian Peninsula and the northern part. So don't know where your origins. You'd have to do genetic tests to work all that out. G'day, Sammy. I answered it. North. Yep, we covered that. That's right. Move on. Too many anti-nutrients as well, like most plants. Heinrich, good to have you here, mate. Yeah, my father loves peppers as well. He grows them, the really chili ones, and he eats them raw. Oh, how does he do it? Doesn't burn his tongue. Ooh. I'd have to have like a liter of milk sitting right next to me to deal with the after effects. Actually, once he put so much damn chili in his meat that he cooked for us that I had to drink milk with it. I couldn't eat it. It was just too hard. He's got really his hands, boiler maker welders, but it seems his tongue was affected by the boiler maker welding as well. Seems to be basically, can withstand any temperature. A bit out of topic. Any recommendations that you have for someone who wants to learn about cartography and the merchant marine? Well, I can tell you about cartography, about the merchant marine. Well, actually, I did have a couple of friends who were in the merchant marine. So, a woman at every port. I'm just joking. Well, some of them anyway. The ones that weren't married did, and even some that were married. But anyway, that's another thing altogether. Some naughty boys. But one thing that people love about merchant marine is they get around. They are able to go to so many ports around the world and see so many things. Now, obviously, you're usually in and out of a port quite fast in some regards, so you don't see a lot. It's more the scenic views as you're coming in and leaving, and occasionally you may spend a bit of time in some of the ports. So that's for a bit of R&R, and people enjoy that. And especially if you're a person that loves traveling, it's probably a pretty good job to be in, so in that regard. Now, in terms of cartography, nowadays it's called spatial science. It's not called cartography. It's a massive field which covers anything from remote sensing, like satellite imagery and stuff like that. Traditional photogrammetry, that's when you're using 3D glasses to work out elevations or coastal areas or stuff like that. So high and low water marks and whatever else, sort of the terrain, the way the terrain is. Then you've basically got sort of areas like which cover the surveying field as well, and so survey drafting, survey comps, areas like analytics, like geographic information systems officers who do a lot of data analytics. So they will, we use for our vegetation layer, we actually use an AI from Queensland University. So that'll actually look at the vegetation, actually work out, we train it basically to teach it. So, it is very computerized and driven, database driven, AI driven, data analytics, the field. So my sort of area was sort of traditional cartography, which is sort of map making, producing maps and stuff like that, producing the the data that is required to build maps and sort of plans, like so survey plans and standard plans and stuff like that, or sort of plans which are sort of for administrative purposes or stuff like that. So that they sort of use land features and stuff like that. They're less accurate. They may use coordinates between a number of points and then other land features to delineate sort of the extent of, whatever's being reserved or whatever's being used for some purpose. It could be for purposes of a lease or a license or whatever. So there's all these sort of things. Other people are into the coding stuff to drive some of these systems. I'm just going to be doing basic stuff as far as coding goes, just developing tools for for certain software packages. So that's all I'm going to do for the next couple of years, together with some other tasks that I do. I know some people love doing things like that have to do with remote sensing and satellite imagery and analyzing images. There's jobs like that in the intelligence community if you really want them. So if you're inclined in that direction, HD. So there's it's a wide field. It's a very wide field, and some people we've had people that have studied surveying that just didn't want to be surveyors and have come over and do GIS work, and others who have gone from, GIS work and then gone away and actually done a few additional courses and gone into the surveying area. There's a bit of a crossover with a lot of this sort of stuff, and now computer science is sort of. I come from an IT type background, a computer science background, rather than originally into cartography. In the early days, when cartography was transitioning using computer-based systems and all that, they wanted people with my skills to be able to move traditional cartography that was just producing maps in a very traditional way, but using software to actually produce the stuff. So it's still, I still had to learn and study cartography in order to be able to then use my IT knowledge to basically then create digital versions of these things. So we scanned everything and we digitized everything, and we used to use in the old days. Now we use heads up type digitizing, which we can do it on the screen. We can just import things and stuff like that. Where in the old days you had to have drafting people or architects have those boards, and you had to pen, you had to draw or do things, and had these control buttons, this thing that used to be able to do from certain points and stuff like that. So it was a very different thing. We used to have simple plotters as well. So the little, with the little things moving around, plotting things. It's interesting anyway. I've gone through the whole. It's transformed so much. Now it's very much database, computer-based, and even AI is becoming even more important, being used to analyze shitloads of data really fast and come up with, and then says, this is the result I've come up with. And then you look at it and you go, okay, this should have been that should have been that. You correct it, you tell it, you teach it. And the next time it gets better at doing the job. So, we're automating a lot of things, and we're doing so many diverse things. We deal with multiple layers of different types, from just hydrography, contours, land formations, vegetation, tidal boundaries, transport, center lines, and processing imagery. So because we contract out companies to basically capture with aeroplanes, if we want really high quality in specific areas, and then basically we have to process it. That takes hours and hours, and then you have to check it, because you have to also put elevation information to make those sort of adjustments. And sometimes you may put the wrong stuff in, because it actually just skews. You find an image that's just completely skewed, and you go, okay, I put the wrong value in there, so I stuffed it up. So you have to correct it. So there's things like that. Some of the other guys that sit right next to me do a lot of that, so I don't have to do, those sort of things. I find that boring, to be honest. Some people just love it, processing imagery. But anyway, I don't. So, but I do other things, which I enjoy. G'day, Loki.
Oh, God. I don't have any audio. Hold on a second.
You do have audio. I can hear you. We can hear you. Don't change anything. Yeah. So HD, so you'll have to go to. It's usually the spatial science and surveying are part of the engineering faculty. So if you're, let's say you're you've done stem subjects, science, mathematics, all these sort of stuff. Stem cell, God, bloody Bart Katie's bloody Cerule coming to mind. But anyway, if you do, STEM subjects, or you've done them, you should have probably enough knowledge in those areas to basically be able to go in and do an engineering course in spatial science. So I don't know what your academic background or your schooling is and what your knowledge is, but you may have to do. I know some universities, if people want to do engineering or science and they've never been really exposed heavily in the past, they do have certain courses like maths base, introductory maths courses and some stem cell courses introduction. So you do 1 year of that to get your introduction, to get your mathematics up to date, because there is a lot of things that you'll have to learn in terms of geometry in particular, like Euclidean geometry and stuff like that. So you'll have to learn some of that sort of stuff if you haven't been taught that, because you may need to make corrections to things. I sometimes get stuff and I'll compute, and if I find that things don't close properly, I know exactly. Or sometimes I'll get a file and they've stuffed up on one of the traverses or whatever, and I immediately can spot it because I know I'm a bit anal about that, but I can find everybody's, why is this distorting? Well, it's right there. Because I could compute it really quickly and work out exactly mathematically why it's not closing properly and where the error lies. So unless you're good at those sort of areas, you may struggle in the field. So I'd say to you, if you've got those strengths, then go for it. But then there are other people that just do basic GIS sort of analytics. They just, which doesn't require as much mathematics or stuff like that or knowledge of that sort. And so it depends on what exactly in the field you do, to be precise. And there are different course structures and stuff like that. So you've got to, different universities have different things. I have no idea what they're offering in your neck of the woods, so to speak. But if you're good at those STEM type subjects, then getting into the engineering faculty to do anything related to spatial science will be should be easy for you to get into that. Yeah. So, good luck anyway. See, my pet things, I spend more time. It is my channel after all, and it is my pet job. I was trying to truncate it, but once I get going, yes. Yeah. What's your take on seafood? Do you like seafood? I tend to like seafood myself.
I actually enjoy seafood a lot. I'm actually having some sardines for lunch tomorrow, half a kilo of them.
You know what my favorite seafood is? Squid.
Squid, really?
I love squid. Squid rings and just frying them. God, I just cut them and fry them and all that. I love it. Absolutely.
I didn't have the freshest squid rings when I tried them, so I didn't like them very much. But I do enjoy mussels a lot.
Yeah, I usually fry them in lard.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I can see that working.
Yeah, it's really nice. So, and we, that on iHerb, but they've got that the pork crackle, which is like a powder type, with egg, you can you can actually exactly put them in egg, beat an egg, put them in egg, then put them in, coat them a bit like, so with all those pork rinds, and then fry that in lard. Oh, magical. Making me hungry. So, yeah, Dad's much better, Sammy. He's the level of the pressure and also the inflammation in his leg is coming down slowly, unfortunately, not fast enough. We're keeping an eye on him. He doesn't seem to have any other symptoms. I've got him on higher doses of taurine, and everything seems to be fine. I think that's the thing that masks the problem for a while, that he hadn't noticed that immediately, is because, again, the taurine was sort of keeping down some of that inflammation. So that was quite interesting. Now he's taking the lubricase supplementation in the morning with his meds later on, and there are no, and I know there's no bad interactions, because that's what the literature is showing, that you can actually take them with the meds, so it's pretty safe. You can't take nattokinase because it does affect different pathways which interact with the drugs, so it's a problem. It is cheaper. It'd be nice if they did work with the drugs, but they don't. So he's still on the blood thinners, and he's taking the nattokinase in the morning, and it seems to be helping. He says his legs getting less swollen, softer, seems to be better functional. He's getting around. He's no longer housebound. He's walking around the place and outdoors as well, and down into the city. So he's not as debilitated anymore, which is good. And it's a short period of time. And I'm not going to say that the lubricase and the taurine and all that have helped, because I don't have any research. But all I can say anecdotally, he seems to be doing much better than other people that get these sort of clotting incidents from the jabs. They seem to be bound to their homes or in a really bad state for a very long time, where Dad's sort of bounced back much faster. So far so good. His progress. So yeah, eventually I will do a video at some stage in regards, but I just want to see how he tracks, how things. Then he'll go in and do a scan, to be assessed, to see how many, do an ultrasound to see what the situation is, and in a month's time, then in 3 months' time, and all that, and then I'll have something to base and say, okay, this is what I did with Dad, and it seems to be working much faster than some of the other methods. Now, it may not. It may take much longer, but maybe the way Dad's dealing will sort out his problems much faster. One can only hope. We'll see how it all plays out. But at the moment, he seems to be doing much better, which, yeah, I'm happy about that. Really happy. I've been quite stressed. Let's put it that way. In the last couple of weeks, I've been really stressed. I lost one parent. I don't want to lose another one. And it's mentally, it's worn me down and tired me. Luckily I've had some people close to me that basically have been very kind and supportive, and sort of allowed me to sort of bounce back a bit better. But yeah, I feel like I've aged a couple of years just in the last couple of weeks. It's just that I've been under such intense, and I think I still am under some stress. It's just not as severe as that initial period, those initial weeks, So I'm seeing now things responding in the right direction, and it's sort of I'm feeling some relief. I'm starting to say, okay, this seems to be working. So yes. So things are on the mend for him and for me. For me, in terms of stress. I'm just wild about Harry. Oh, thanks, Nathan. Yes, Definitely was. I mean, even in the US, the amount of cattle, America back in the 70s had, I mean, now the US has like 2.5 times more people than it had in the 70s. And people back then were eating more meat than today. I mean, I'll give you an example. There was over a I'm trying to think now the numbers. Let me just check. That's right. Yeah, I was. Yeah. Okay. As of 2021, the herd decreased from in 2019, it was 94.8 million, the cattle herd in the US. Now, due to COVID and all that sort of stuff, supply chain disruption, it's gone down by 1.3% to 93.6 million. Exactly. And back in the mid 70s, it was over 100 million. So the population in the US has grown by 2.5 times, and the cattle population has gone down from 100 million, over 100 million, to 93 point, what was it again? Whatever. Yeah, 90, I killed it off 93.8 or 6, whatever. So, yeah, so it's basically you've got far less people consuming than back in the 70s, and people were way healthier back then. Now, they had been doing domestically, because even then, even like places like McDonald's, up until the 90s, they were still using tallow to cook their fried stuff. It was only under pressure from all these crazies that basically they changed at the time. So even though, yes, you could still engage the Randall cycle. Yes, you could still basically, it was a bit unhealthy, but what what you didn't get? You may have got a bit of, if you ate too much, some of that sugary stuff, you may have ended up with diabetes, but you wouldn't have ended up with too much lipid peroxidation and less heart disease, because people in the past, so that's the other thing. But by adding these oils, you added even another layer of mitochondrial damage plus lipid peroxidation, massive amount of lipid peroxidation in the body. So oxidative stress, so to speak, when we say lipid peroxidation. Primary, secondary oxidative products plus aldehydes that rip cell membranes to bits, including lipoprotein membranes. I wonder how LDL happens. Yes, that's how it happens. And they knew it back in the 80s and basically ignored it. 83, 84 research. I've talked about it in the past. And pretty much their solution was, well, we can't change the food supply, so let's give everybody statins. What a ridiculous. Let's keep less LDL in the bloodstream so less can be oxidized. That's not a solution. Get the toxin out of the food supply so you don't have to worry about where LDL is. It does other things as well. I wonder why people have problems with having strong immune systems and defending themselves a bit against diseases. LDL has a role in the immune system. If you lower it too much, you're more susceptible to sepsis. You're more susceptible to all these other infections. Oh, great. Other side effect. Yeah. Wonderful, the medical fraternity. Oh, yes, we'll give you an antibiotic for sepsis because your LDL is too low to be able to deal with it. Your immune system's in the toilet. Yeah. Great world we live in. It's just madness on steroids and getting madder by the day. Yes. How does that? Well, you usually don't have a lot of energy. Any mitochondrial disease just means you have less energy. And so, this is actually becoming even a bigger problem. Younger people, like take Jonathan, that He'll be on tonight's live stream. And, Jonathan basically has had a lot of mitochondrial problem and a lot of fatigue and problems like that. Well, most people don't realize that if your mummy is already damaged with mitochondrial insufficiency, and then she's basically got also already some damaged reverse Krebs cycle, which is dragging in more and more deuterium into her cells and making them less functional, that all that excess stuff, she actually, when a mother has this massive amount, when she actually see, some deuterium is required as a growth factor in children. Excess amount does damage. And what happens is the body will just suck it in from the mother. There's no sort of like control. Traditionally, a mother would have been healthier, eating a species appropriate diet, and only would have sent in, only a certain proportion would have gone in, and would have depleted her deuterium to such a level, she'd be very healthy and recover very fast. Also, her milk would have less deuterium, and also she would bounce back and recover really like a lot of the tribal women do. They just pop them out and start, breastfeeding them, and it's just, and then they can get on with their work and life and all that. Got all this energy. I wonder why Western women don't, because already a whole lot of carbs are damaging their babies and they're damaging themselves, their mitochondria, and they have excess, and the children are taking up more and more deuterium in very early age, damaging the mitochondria. And the more mitochondria you damage, you end up causing reverse Krebs cycle, and reverse Krebs cycle pulls in to the mitochondria even more deuterium to accelerate the damage. And so the damage becomes worse and worse and worse. And then you end up with cancer. No wonder we're getting to a stage where they're saying, 1 in 3 will have cancer in America. Wonderful, in the next decade or two. I wonder why. Because we're basically putting so much deuterium in our cells, we'll basically be all in wheelchairs with cancer. Fantastic. Complete collapse of our society by that stage. That's, what a future. Seems to be working very well for the depopulation strategy of our overlords. That's just an opinion, YouTube. It's just an opinion. A hypothesis on my part. Better correct myself. Yet to be proven. But yes, so through multiple approaches, we're being slowly damaged quite severely. So you basically have less and less energy, and at some stage you'll need a walking frame to move. So yes, or a nurse to assist you out of your chair. Yeah. So that's how bad it gets over time. So you may have a lot of mitochondrial damage and all that, and still people say, well, how come these people not everyone's getting cancer? Because some people have genetics and have better intracellular antioxidant systems that can keep it, you can sort of counteract some of the damage that glycolysis fermentation causes. And also, if you've got less damage in your cells themselves, you can still run on fermentation without basically being sufficiently damaged yet into a senescent state to basically become more vulnerable to become cancerous. So there's a whole lot of reasons why it takes some time, but at some point it will increase. That's why the rates of cancer are outpacing many other diseases currently. And while they're talking about 1 in 3, it's not accidental. It's a mitochondrial, it's mitochondrial damage due to deuterium overload, pretty much. So what you need to do is take deuterium depleted water to lower. I'm going to do a video. Llama's been running around finding me all sorts of sources. A couple of other people as well have notified me, telling me about different water sources and lower pricings and stuff like that. So we've been looking at a lot of things at the moment. And so I'll be able to put a video together to provide a bit of additional information to help people lower their cellular stored levels of, or sort of flush out or reduce the amount of deuterium in their body, pretty much. By putting in lower deuterium water, what you're doing is you are basically reducing by diluting the levels in your body. So we can slow down the damage. Then we can use taurine to basically repair and amplify melatonin, and melatonin will go in there and repair the electron chains in the mitochondria. So good sleep, blue blocking glasses at night, and stuff like that for healthy mitochondria. So we've all done plenty of damage, and now we have to pay the piper with deuterium depleting water, glasses, and all sorts of other things to try and fix things and reverse a lot of that damage and make our mitochondrial density higher in our cells, so they work more like youthful cells or undamaged youthful cells. So then we end up with a longer life, healthier lifespan, rather than a chronic lifespan that goes like that. And you may live longer on drugs, keeping you alive and zapping you with contraindicating radiation or whatever else, but that's not a life living if you can't get out of a seat and you're decrepit. So because of lack of energy, we need warp speed, Scotty. Yes, we need deuterium depleted Scotty water to get the hyperdrive working. Anyway, let's move on before I say more foolish things. Is making bone broth a good way to extract bone minerals from? Yep, it is. Yep, it is. You can add those fluids into a soup and stuff like that. So yes, it is. It can be helpful, especially people that have been. I usually, if people are not that depleted, I usually say, yeah, probably don't need it. But if people have come from a vegan, vegetarian, a very poor diet, and have got a lot of deficiencies in terms of minerals and vitamins and stuff like that, it's probably a good idea to do a bit more organ meats, a bit bone broths and stuff like that, to add more of those nutrients that you're missing. And then you can ease up on those things, So you don't need to basically be doing these in excessive amounts, but for a couple of months doing them in excessive amounts is probably a good idea to really build up to reverse a lot of the deficiencies. You could take supplements, but animal foods are going to be better absorbed, much better sources. It's in the food matrix in a way where it also includes a whole lot of other peptides and other elements that are really important to balance out and properly regulate the way these things function, because they work synergistically. They just don't work on their own. So, occasionally if we put them on a steak only diet, they can't tolerate some of these foods. We may give them like a trace mineral and certain things, because some people, you can't get them to eat liver. You can't get them to eat eggs. You can't, a lot of these other things, or crustaceans, they hate them or whatever. So you go, okay, we'll use trace minerals, which have got the proper ionic sort of charge, like the ones, like those ones from King Island in Tasmania, those types, so they will be basically the lower proteins in the gut wall will, because of the right ionic charge, that can be actually taken up, absorbed, by those peptides in the actual digestive tract. So these are the sort of things that sometimes we need to do with some people who have difficulty with these things. But I'm not recommending, going on like a binge on organ meats and stuff like that for decades or stuff like that. I don't think our ancestors did any of that sort of stuff. If they ever used organ meats, they used them small amounts as multivitamins that cut a bit of liver, that share it around. Even in Greece, you may have liver every day, but it's just small a bit, like those little, you'd have like a bit of cheese and then one of those little pieces. So we're talking about, a couple of grams. Yes, you have it very often, but it's a treat. It's more, like a multivitamin every day, and that's fine. So But if you're in the early stages where you're very deficient, yeah, I'd be considering organ meats, bone broths, and because I did a lot of organ meats, bone broths, and a number of other things, crustaceans, all that, to really sort out a lot of things. And I smart enough to put enough taurine in there to regulate, so anything in excess would be forced out through the regulation of taurine, regulating at the kidney level to excrete things much faster, and the bile to get things out through the feces. So you didn't have any excess problems as an issue. As a problem. God. Anyway, amateur time. Move on. Do you ask about how doesn't bone broth actually doesn't have bone broth itself, you won't extract into the fluids a lot. You actually extract more of the other minerals, and you actually extract calcium. That's why I don't recommend it as a calcium substitute. That's why, as I said earlier, dairy or actual bones themselves, which have got a lot of calcium. That means bones from fish bones. So like sardines, eating the whole sardine. Yeah, but bone broth, definitely not. Good point. In that regard, it's sometimes, even though I, pointed to dairy and pointed to sardines, sometimes you need to clarify things. And when it comes to bone broth, because a lot of people maybe, for whatever reason, think that there's more calcium than there really is, but there isn't. No. Unless you crush the bone itself with a hammer and crush it to bits and actually consume that, then yes. But if you're just extracting under, heat and all that, and then throwing away the bones and just eating the fluids, consuming the fluids in a soup or whatever, nope. Very good point. I've read the bone broth is good for glycine and ups glutathione. Yeah. Glycine is not the only thing. Selenium is another thing that's required. Actually, selenium is even more important because when it comes to the amino acids, your body can actually synthesize anything. It's like a Swiss Army knife. It gets enough protein, it can synthesize any sort of combination of amino acid that the body requires for all sorts of problems. No, it's usually things like selenium that are far more important for glutathione, because some people may not be eating enough eggs or liver or certain crustaceans and may not be getting enough selenium. So, which also supports the thyroid. And obviously your selenium requirements do come down as you get healthier, because you need less glutathione. You don't produce as much because you're less inflamed. It's usually in the earlier days when you're transitioning months and all that, that's probably good to try and get some of these nutrients in slightly higher. So always remember, not above 500 micrograms, even though it's with selenium, it's a funny thing, can be an issue, but then again, it's a question mark. I've seen research where people have been much higher, not an issue, but they did have more iodine in their system, so that sort of balanced out in the thyroid. But still, I think the toxicity thing is overrated at those sort of levels. So I've seen people basically consume massive amounts of Brazil nuts, and well, that selenium is mostly chelated, but even if they were getting quite a high dose, you'd think that you would have seen by now people that consume a lot of Brazil nuts, a large quantity, you'd see massive toxicity all over the literature. You don't see it. So there could be a problem, but the word is there could maybe, and maybe not. So I'll put a question mark on that. As Bart would say, not enough research to basically be certain. But I think we need more than the RDI, which is about 50 micrograms, or around 55, I think, which is
it's far too low. Yeah.
That's what you'd get from one egg, approximately, or close to it a bit, or maybe it's 2 eggs. Can't remember. It's a while. Yes. I did a DNA test, but don't know how to interpret the results much. That guess I have whether they're good or not. I didn't do that video, did I? That I need to do a video. Or did I? I can't remember whether. I think in one video I did include some of the websites where you can actually do some of the testing. But what I'll do is I'll do a specific short video. I'll do it tomorrow. Tomorrow night. I should have some time. And I'll actually, it just has to be a 5-minute video. It doesn't have to be very long. So it's easy to do. But I'll do something. Or I might even I'll actually do it when I get back. After this live stream, I have to go somewhere. Before I start the other live stream, I'll do it then, and I'll actually publish it. I've got another one that's actually going to be published at about 3 o'clock Australian Eastern Standard Time, so they'll go live then. So there'll be an in-between. I may even start it earlier when I finish this live stream. So, and then I'll put the other one in when I get back. I should have enough time to do a 5-minute thing. And I'll put up some of the websites where you can upload your 23andMe and many of the other stuff, and it'll actually tell you about detox and methylation and stuff like that. So you've got an idea of what your status is and stuff like, what to look for. The other stuff I'm not going to give away because I want to do a video on the calcium stuff and a few other things. So you'll have to wait until those videos are produced. So I don't want to give too much away.
I'm still waiting for your repeat diss track.
The CO2 thing. I need to do that as well. God almighty. Oh, anyway, thanks for reminding me. Got a lot of things to do. I'm gonna have to force myself to do it sometime this week. Yeah, that'd be a good one because Danny said a couple of idiotic things recently, and Bart sort of had because he's on that sort of CO2 and the carbon and the sugar stuff and all that. Bart covered it from another angle, obviously, but I think I need to cover it from my sort of angle that I want to. Yeah. Maybe I'd do it as humorous as I did when I did the one with the homocysteine that I did with Ray Pete. Maybe I'd do one with Danny saying these things and then me just taking the piss out of him and just showing the obvious errors in his way. So so if I have to do that, that would take longer. So people need to understand that, because that means I have to research some of his bloody videos again and remember where and find them, because he does these long videos like I do as well, but he waffles. He doesn't really answer much and just repeats the same sort of reductionist nonsense that Ray Pete actually repeats all the time. So I was gonna just go to because I've got it like Ray Pete's actual blogs where he says there's certain things and just do the sort of that, but actually it would be funnier and probably get more likes and hits if I did used Danny in that video. So actually the funny thing is he actually came back on that one that the initial one that the previous one to the current one that Bart did. He came back and said, because I actually wrote in, I said, well, I challenged him and Bart challenged him. I got Bart on one of his live streams and he complained that he wasn't set up for it at the time and all that.
Yep.
And I said to him, you could have basically invited him back, or even me, whoever. I challenged him first. He ignored me, and basically then he told Bart that, he can't do it at this moment. So, and then after that, he basically came back on that comment and said, oh, look, all this gave you this. I said, well, that's fine, but you did actually say that you would get back to him, and you never did. So you've got an opportunity. And then he replies back and says, oh, look, in the last couple of 18 months, so many carnivores have dropped off the carnivore diet. How many? Not like the vegan movement or any other movement, or the so many carnivores. A handful like Saladino and a few others. Big bloody deal. Couple of ones that have no idea what they're doing, or want to sell product. but I'll leave that. That's a personal opinion.
Yeah.
But pretty much that was his excuse. But I wasn't going to be nasty because I said to him, "Look, that's fine. That's you're free to do whatever you like. If you don't want to, if somebody doesn't want to debate somebody, you can't force them. I mean, that's illogical. We're not going to be children on the side goes, you're yellow, or a chicken, or things like that. That's just childish. That's fine if you don't want to, but that doesn't mean we're not going to basically criticize your claims or show how idiotic they are in videos that we'll produce. If you want to debate those views and where you think we're wrong, go right ahead and debate with us. But if you don't, we're still going to basically point out the errors of your ways. So basically that's the sort of approach. I said, yeah, fine, if you don't, but the offer's still open, it's on the table. I left it at that. He never responded after that. So, it's me and Bart find it very hard to get anyone to for those sort of debates or whatever. Maybe they look at us and go, "Oh God, they're going to rip us to bits," and so they get very cagey. I didn't think I was that threatening.
It's always the funniest things with them. They always say stuff like, "Oh, you see, Bart craves sweet foods when he's stressed, and that's obviously because the body needs carbs." And I'm like, "Oh God, really? That's the level of argumentation we're having here."
How childish or how ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly.
Come up with clear, get rid of reductionism and come up with real clear, stuff, that evidence that you can actually back up why there's a requirement for carbohydrates. We know that even in when you're actually fasting or going to keto initially, you do have an elevation in cortisol, but then it comes down. It normalizes again. That is a normal physiological adjustment because your mechanisms are not ready yet to adapt to that. And so you need to transcript a whole lot of enzymes and all that to be able to do the work. So what happens is your body's adjusting. So it is a stressful, it's like exercising. Your body stresses and then adjusts. The next time you do an exercise, you can tolerate it far more. So it's the same sort of thing. You change, adapt, the body adapts. It's an adaptation phase that you go to. That's why we criticize those 1 or 2 week keto studies, because there's no adaptation period. The enzymes are required and the downregulation of the other pathways to basically allow for the body to work on utilizing fats and ketones is in a different state. So you have to shift. It takes a transition time. And so they just ignore that and make out, oh, look at this study, that what it says. I mean, how childish can you be? I mean, really? Why don't you look at long-term, like a year study or 2 years or whatever, and they do exist, or 6 months or whatever. Look at those. Do you see those? You don't. So why are you showing that and misinforming people by showing them just these 2-3 week studies that is an adaptation period? Because you're pushing an ideology. You're pushing an agenda. That's why you don't show the other stuff. So it's really easy to blow away their arguments. It's not that difficult because their arguments are basically pointless, reductionists, and based on just poor research, poor data. But they think that if I repeat this bullshit, because they actually believe it. The funny thing is, if I repeat this bullshit over and over again, people will start believing it. It's like repeating a lie over and over again. People wonder, could there be some truth in that? Where there's smoke, there must be fire. You know what I mean? All this sort of stuff. It's much harder to argue against a falsehood than to put a false, So once a falsehood gets out, it's much harder to combat it. That's why we've been struggling to be able to combat these sort of, contraindicated ideas, because it's really damn hard. And then it's like the N15 data. They find one animal in, I think it's Southern Africa, that basically has a very high N15 level because it eats bark. and that bark has high N15 levels. For whatever reason, this plant is concentrating rather than N14 that all other plants concentrate. This plant in its bark, it concentrates. None of us have got any idea, but it does. And this animal eats it. But what gives it away? That it's basically not coming from any other grass or any other stuff or whatever. The delta 13 isotope. That's where the difference is, because there's, you don't get that sort of high elevation. In us, we get high N15, high delta 13. We know that it's coming from grasses, not bark or anything else. It's coming directly from grasses. And since we're not eating the grass, and the animal that we're eating is eating, because otherwise we'd have high delta 13 and high N14. But we've got very low N14, very high N15, plus the delta 13 telling us that it's coming from an animal that eats C4 grass can concentrate this isotope. Voila. You eat it, you get these two isotopes. There's the carbon isotope, there's the nitrogen isotope. Photo complete, slam dunk. You don't have to argue, because the science, the data itself proves our case. But the problem is these people just, they'll come up with all sorts of spurious things. They'll talk about coprophiles, like a bit of fiber here, that's survived, and with as if you could live on that, or you've got you don't even have a cecum to process it to get any energy from it. It's just ridiculous, to say the least. So their arguments can be ripped to pieces so quickly. I can do it without, working up a sweat. I can be in a comatose state and still pull them apart. Half asleep and still pull them apart. Their arguments are so childish and so ridiculous and reductionist. They sound foolish. They sit there just talking about, they'll throw up all these reductionists, or they'll talk about the electron chain and some of the redox sort of, the FAD and the NAD and stuff like that. They'll throw about in terms of that, but they don't even explain properly. And what does the redox, even if you're not in a state of random cycle activation, redox states are always in operation, because how otherwise you'd be dead. You wouldn't be producing energy, as Bart says. So why are you referring it? It's just, again, we'll throw all these complex terms out, biochemistry terms, in order to seem that we're smart, that we know what we're talking about. That's what they're doing. They're dumb as dog shit, basically, and that's why they can be pulled apart. You can just ask them certain questions. That's why they don't want to debate us, because we would start asking them certain questions and they wouldn't be able to answer them because they don't understand them. They have this little reductions. They can blurt out these single statement sort of things and act smart, but in reality, they just basically dumb as dog shit, basically. So it's the reason why people like me and Bart can come up with hypotheses why the body works this way and whatever, like me about the cancer and the reverse Krebs cycle and all these sort of intermediates, the way they work and all that interaction, which I did in my recent video. But the thing is, I dumb it down. I'm not going to use complex biochemistry to baffle you guys. Why? To act smart? That's just childish. I'll explain that complex stuff in simple terms. And when you can explain it in simple terms, it means you understand it. People that don't understand it have to use the complex terms because they don't understand it, how it actually works. So they have to use that in order. It's like, use terms to basically, because I can't explain it. And even some academics that are not sure about certain things, they'll use certain terms, they'll throw in certain terms. And when you go, okay, you don't really understand that, and that's why you have to throw that to basically sort of cover that reality. If I ask you a specific question on that, I'd see you basically squirm or squeal or whatever. So, yeah. So, anyway, yeah, but I do need to do this bloody video on DNA. I've been saying that. I need to remind myself. I'll be doing it today because I've got all the links. I know where it is. So let's get it done for people to be able to go, because everybody's now doing these DNA tests because of this person telling them to. That is a good idea. Yeah, so I better pull my finger out and provide them with the resources. Okay. Anyway, let's move on. It's really funny out there, it's a bit like, your glycine, and people say, "Oh, glycine will actually, produce a whole lot of oxalate." You've probably heard that, if you supplement and all that. There's actually an old study I came across, 94 or 96, I can't remember now. I'll have to bloody find it. It's got in one of my folders. And they didn't see, even when they were providing more glycine, they didn't see any increase in urinary oxalate. So that was really interesting, that calcium was playing a bigger role there rather than glycine. So it was really interesting. I'm going, okay, maybe all the glycine stuff has come from associated data. I suspect so. Because I found even a more recent study as well. That was last week at work. So I've still got on my computer at work. I need to put it on a memory stick and bring it home. But anyway, and I think that was in 21, and actually showed similar results. So that was really interesting, because a lot of naturopaths will say that glycine excess amounts will create oxalate, is sort of the sort of view out there. And I don't think we really have good research to basically back that whole notion up. And I think when the research is done where there's a whole lot of other confounding variables, you may be getting that. And I think it's being blamed via association. So on a pure carnivorous diet, I don't think that happens, at all, even if you were to supplement, which seems to be good for muscle repair and stuff like that. So I'm in, obviously, I never recommend single high doses for prolonged use of single amino acids. Not a good idea for a whole lot of reasons we won't go into. But for short-term use, yeah, they can be valuable for a number of people, for especially, muscle issues, healing or stuff, or strains, or, ligament problems or whatever. They can be very useful in those sort of cases when they have need for a bit additional glycine. But yeah, it was quite interesting that the research didn't pan out the way most of the naturopaths out there seem to be peddling, that, excess glycine creates problems. So yeah, there's a lot of things out there. The amount of myths and bullshit is beyond a joke. The more you look into it, the more you realize, how did they come up with this conclusion? So never ceases to amaze me. Let's put it that way. And understanding one's tolerance to histamines may inform the method of cooking bone broth. Now, if you're getting enough taurine to fix up to regulate inflammasome, you're not going to have histamines or spermidine to grow excess bacterial overgrowth. So you won't have either one of those issues. It's just a taurine deficiency, or not getting enough for oxalate dumping, burning through your taurine or sulfur amino acid sort of load in your body. So that's usually what it is. It's just you're basically depleting sulfur amino acids if you've got the dumping of things like oxalate. But then again, there can be other factors that can actually have degradation of sulfur, certain pathogenic bacteria and stuff like that. So there you may have to use Ruteri to suppress the little buggers, and they get taurine to do the little trick to fix things. So that's why I have those other videos with Ruteri that goes in, fixes up C. diff and a number of others that have sulfur degrading effects, which means that you get less, because those little buggers get more, those pathogenic ones. So that can be a problem. And some people say, I've taken taurine and it's not really working for me. And I go, you need Ruteri. You need to suppress those little buggers and bring them under control. And then as you have better bile flow as well, you'll clean out the small intestine out of those buggers, which is the other important thing. And then you'll have less of these absorption issues and stuff like that. So, because they've migrated from the colon, the little buggers, and they need to be cleansed out of the. So sometimes you need to do strategies like that with HCl and stuff like that to sort of clean things out. There's a lot of things. People are at different stages of healing and problems and stuff like that. So it's not going to be the same for everyone how they deal with these issues. By nature, in his eczema thing, get B vitamins. Niacin actually helps with skin issues, UV and these sort of skin type issues. Retinol also helps with, but you should be getting enough of that. But the other thing that can actually cause excess, like dry skin, excess eczema, excess, and good to see you, Eye Nature, excess of these sort of skin is sometimes the hydration level of the skin can be a problem. And like niacin complex has also got nicotinamide, which is that sort of reduced form, which is part of the complex. It's what's in the cheap B3 vitamins. Well, that stuff actually, that component, which is in the niacin complex, that part on its own, taking it as a supplement, will actually help retain moisture in the skin. And by retaining moisture in the skin, will actually reduce some of these conditions. So it's a sort of an interesting little biohack, little hack. Obviously, once you actually improve oxidative phosphorylation, you improve fluid function and regulation in the body. Once you improve a whole lot of regulatory systems, and you achieve better homeostasis of fluids within the body, you tend to have less of these problems. And it sort of takes time to fix up derangements, improve your energy status, and then to regulate all that with sufficient taurine in the diet, and usually things fall into place. But some people are still in the early part of their journey with a lot of health issues and all that, and still are correcting a lot of these sort of things. And sometimes these sort of interventions can help, supplemental interventions can help sort of, reduce some of those issues. Anyway, okay. Prefer understanding beeves with eating bones. Costco isn't always clean cut on that. I have no idea about Costco. I live in Australia, so we don't have. Well, I don't know. On the mainland, do we have any stores? Maybe there are. Yeah, but Tasmania. So I could not tell you. I haven't even looked into. I sort of, most of my stuff. G'day, Charles. Most of my stuff that I get, I'm getting it locally. I've got, so from the IGA stores, I get from the Huonville Butcher. There's stuff that I get from them. Then I get from the farmers market. I get from Old Farm. What are they called? The Old Farmer. I can't remember their full name. I get from them like my beef, bacon, and some other meat cuts now and then. There's another guy there, I forget their name. Probably Hello Kitty, if she was here, she'd remember the damn, because we go together and do the shopping. So there's beautiful, sausages, lamb sausages, absolute divine. So I usually get from one, I get the pork ones and the other one. So yeah, really enjoy those. So, my sources are pretty much cleaner. They're from farmers, from true dinky dye farmers. 1 o'clock Australian Eastern Standard Time. and I cut my time restricted feeding. So I added 2 extra hours. Usually it's 11. The coffee's cold. Anyway, I'm used to drinking cold coffee at work because I keep my coffee there for hours sometimes, just plowing through work, and then I go, I better have another zip. So, yeah, it's the way I am. Good to have you here, mate. My question today is, are omega-3 legit or scam? If they indeed essential. Yeah, look, omega-3s and omega-6s are essential fatty acids. We do need them. But we can get enough from an animal diet. So you don't need to supplement. Definitely not. And we definitely don't want to supplement. Supplements are very contraindicated. They tend to be very high in primary and secondary oxidative products. Once you actually extract it from the actual food matrix of an animal, you really degrade. It can degrade much faster. Same thing with plant fats. But then they usually go to the next level, the food industry, and put it through a refinery and really make it toxic, seed oils. But in this case, a lot of them, some of them are better quality stuff. Some of them are cold pressed in the traditional way. So, but they still will degrade to some extent. But if you're in a low inflamed state, you probably, tolerate them if you've acquired them at an early stage of production. But the problem is they will degrade much more rapidly than they do within a food matrix. So I always recommend people take their omega-3s in terms of food, fish, grass finished beef, lamb, because it'll always be grass finished. Well, especially in Australia, lamb's too expensive to basically feed. So, and doesn't do very well, gets very sick very quickly. So they prefer just give it, even if they're going to give it, they'll give it hay and things like that, because it can't tolerate these sort of refined carbohydrates at all. So yes, they are essential. They do vary, like in the brain, it's sort of a 1-to-1 basis. And that's where some of the sort of, this ratio 1-to-1, but it's nonsense. In the peripheral tissue, which is all the other cells outside the brain, it's called the peripheral tissue. So in all those sort of other parts of the body, the cells have 11-to-1 ratio between omega-3s and omega-6s. Omega-6s are higher. And it tends to be because when we're eating from the animal sources, we're not doing any of the conversions. And so we leave all the linoleic acid to be converted through that enzymatic pathway that competes. And that's why people talk about ratios. You don't have to worry on, and you actually convert most of that to arachidonic acid. So you end up with much less linoleic acid. So that to ratio to DHA is reduced considerably, because most of the actual omega-6 that you get in as linoleic acid gets converted to arachidonic acid. And if you're eating animal foods, it also has higher amounts of arachidonic acid anyway. And arachidonic acid is actually used by bodybuilders to heal and repair. It's for stress. You give somebody arachidonic acid, they're really stressed, you can actually really lower their stress levels and make them feel much better, put them in a better state, and they'll feel less pain. So if you've got pain, you give some arachidonic acid supplementation and their pain goes away. Initially it goes up because it's the healing effect, but then it goes away once you've healed. So you can actually, they use it, bodybuilders use it. So, but you don't need to. I mean, it's not as if we're doing like stupendous stuff. Better just to consume the animals that have got it and allow the body to do the conversions. Does them very well, as long as it's not competing with a whole lot of plant ALA.
Time for more bacon then.
Exactly. Yeah. That's how I get mine. I don't, it's ridiculous to supplement, let alone to get the high quality supplements, the ones that don't degrade or anything like that, because these are omega-6s, remember, they got double bonds, to get the high quality, they are prohibitively expensive. They have some that are basically in like sort of like an MCT type thing, and they've got all these other antioxidants in and stuff like that. And you're paying an arm and a leg, and I'm going, why would I waste myself? If I really want a lot of this sort of stuff, I'll just go and buy pork rind or crackle and cook that up and actually eat that and really enjoy myself. Why the hell would I go and pay heaps and heaps of, as long as I'm not taking in to compete with ALA, I'm not eating any plants, don't have to worry about it. So I wouldn't call it exactly a scam, but the most of, let's say it's a contraindicated supplement. I would not recommend omega-3s as a supplement because the majority of them are quite rancid, and the majority of them have high aldehydes and primary and secondary oxidative products, the majority out there, the products that are in the market. Because to really make the expensive stuff, it'd be prohibitive. Why would you bother? You'd rather buy, you can get the same amount from, eating meat, eating fish and stuff like that. So why would you bother? And the cheap stuff is just too nasty because it's got too many, it's rancid. And Mr. K, Professor K, he's actually done a number of studies on that. And he's published those studies and shown quite clearly that the supplements are quite high in aldehydes. So anything that's high in aldehydes is usually high in primary and secondary oxidative products, because you first have to have the oxidative products before you can have the high aldehydes. So, so they go together. So once you know that, you don't even have to check for primary and secondary oxidative products. They'll be through the roof if you've got high aldehydes. So pretty much he's done a number of studies on aldehydes in these sort of products. And these are regular commercial stuff. I mean, stuff that he's bought out of a pharmacy, and then they tested them in a lab at the university where he was working before he resigned in disgust with the management, with the bean counters. Because basically it wasn't other he may have had disagreements with the, other academics, but it was really the management of the institution that, Yes, now you must be compliant, Mr. K. You must be a good virtual signaling academic. If you're not, yes. And it, identifying as an attack helicopter will not work, Mr. K. So yes, that's the sort of treatment I got.
Oh, God.
I just say, you took advice from Ted. That's your problem, Bart. Took advice from Ted and told them you're an attack helicopter. No wonder they reacted that way.
Bart took the TED pill.
Yes. I said a few other things in the past to him about Ted, but anyway, we won't go there.
I can imagine one of the things you said.
Well, he mispronounces my name deliberately as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, sort of thing. So I take the piss out of him, he takes the piss out of me anyway. We're good friends. And what was the other one? Oh, seasonal allergies, like having food histamine intolerance and stuff like that. Yeah, there can be. Look, some people can be susceptible. That is, and I usually find that people that tend to be having higher, like allergy type symptoms and stuff like that, also tend to be much lower in vitamin D.
Yes, that was likely my case as well. I grew up being with severe allergic rhinitis and seasonal allergies. So
yeah. Exactly. Once you get your vitamin D up to a good status, it usually resolves it. Now, there is another thing that is structural, like my sister had with her structural asthma, which is not a standard, like an autoimmune type asthma, because they do exist. It's autoimmune. It's usually vitamin D related. But then you've got also structural asthma. That's a dietary thing. And she was vegetarian for many years and wasn't basically getting enough choline and palmitate. So she wasn't getting enough of the saturated fats that you require to build lung surfactant. So lung surfactant has got two key elements: choline and palmitate, palmitic acid, which is the key thing that the body always stores fat, whenever it converts sugar, it converts it to palmitate, carbon
Yeah.
16, which can be cleaved off as 4 carbons for ketones. I wonder why the body does this.
So
Yeah, it's not.
mysterious.
Yeah, so mysterious. Yes. For the crackpots out there, palmitate's really bad, kiddies, according to the crackpots. Yeah, but the body stores it and then can actually cleave it off and create ketone bodies when it requires energy. Must be so stupid, the body. These academics know much better. Don't listen to the body. Ignore the body. It's wrong. Genetics, our genes don't know what they're talking about. They need an expert to tell them how to work. Remember. So next time you've got problems with your genes, go to an academic and ask them to basically talk to your genes. Just give them a megaphone and stuff like that. That's how ridiculous it gets. Anyway, yeah. So basically, yes. And now, once she basically got her levels up in terms of choline, so she eats shitloads of eggs now to get a lot of choline, a bit of liver and stuff like that. What my ancestors on the west coast did. And I've got the same pathway, the genetic pathway. So I said, I've had similar problems because I used to have touch asthma as a youngster. And I realized that as I grew up, then I got into eggs and I got into other things and foods that basically had more choline. And I was able to deal with that problem where she didn't. She went down the wrong route even further than me. And as a consequence, even though I was eating seed oils and all that, I was still eating far more meat and stuff like that because I enjoyed that stuff, But I may have been cooking it in appropriate oils, but that's a different thing altogether. But yeah. So once she was with me for 10 months, when she came back from Greece, stayed with me until she could get her feet on the ground and, get a job and all that sort of stuff. So while she was doing that, she was working within a couple of months after that. She was working and doing, going to school at the same time. So yeah, I'll take my hat off to her. She did really well. In thinking that she finished a degree at Tas Uni in management, and here's a woman that's was in her latter years of her life, and was pretty much middle aged, getting close to 50, and basically goes back to school. I think she was 50 actually, and she went back to school and got it qualified. And at the same time, she was working, and at one stage she was working 2 jobs. So people that say, well, push yourselves. You can anybody can achieve anything, and she could come back and get her qualifications and all that. So yeah, but anyway, that's another story. I won't go into it. But yeah, she had structural asthma, and she was a smoker as well. Doesn't help. But here's the funny thing: she was still a light smoker when her asthma went away. And she goes, how does that happen? They told me that this is probably making it worse. I said, if you've got a problem, yes, it will make it worse. But the problem isn't the smoking. It's, that smoking will cause you other health issues, which isn't a good thing in the long run. So I wouldn't do it. It could cause you lung cancer, all sorts of things. So it's not an indicated thing. But I said, asthma is not caused by smoking. It's not caused by any of this sort of stuff. It's just like those things exacerbate it. At the end of the day, what you had is structural asthma, and and it got resolved. And I said, and the reason for that is because I know that because I've got the same genetics as you. We come from the same family, so and it made sense because all my sisters had asthma as adults, and they were both vegetarians, and I had touch asthma as a youngster and bronchitis, and then resolved it with animal foods as a youngster and didn't even realize I started eating more animal foods and just did not realize it, and still continued even though I was eating a whole lot of inappropriate stuff that was doing the damage. My sisters cut back on that because they went all vegetarian when they, for 25 years and ended up with asthma and a whole lot of other issues, health issues. And then once Susie basically sorted out her health and no longer had asthma, threw away the puffer, no longer needs to use a puffer or anything like that, my older sister goes, "Really? So what did you do?" Well, Harry said, "We've got a problem with choline, that we need to consume more choline because we can't synthesize it internally. We've got genetics and a number of things like that. So we need to consume more things like liver, or eggs in particular, which is a better source without over vitaminosis, much better eggs, or shitloads of meat, because choline's in meat as well. If you eat shitloads of it, most people have difficulty. So I usually say, well, if you can't eat shitloads of meat, which is indicated, then at least put a few more eggs, because eggs have got far more choline in them, and that will all supplement if you can't do eggs either. So it really fixed up her structural asthma really fast and resolved everything. And she was shocked, and my older sisters, followed a similar path to sort out her, but she's still on, she's struggling to try and do low carb, let alone, try to give up the carbs or the mixed diet, my older sister. So she's still struggling with her weight, with a whole lot of other issues. Yeah, I've tried to convince her, and I've just, not that I've given up, but I'm not pushing anymore. She has to make the decision herself. It's her body in the end. So, yeah, anyway. But my younger sister, she's very much gone low carb, and she's really healthy and much healthier, fitter. Obviously, all the other things that he did, there was some damage, and it's going to take, as I said to her, it's going to take a decade. And she said, "I know," but she said, "You've already resolved so many issues. You've lowered my addiction levels. You've fixed. I don't need to take a puffer anymore. I don't have asthma anymore, and all that." So she's very happy, and she's in the family like Harry knows what he's saying. Shut the F up, the rest of yous, sort of. So she's got zero tolerance for the others if they criticize me. Because there's always people out there that will, for whatever reason, they've got their own ideologies. Anyway,
I should get going. It's way past midnight.
Yeah, look, do that. I mean, last night I stayed up really late myself, and I know the feeling when you stay up late, you're groggy and all that. I just sort of dragged myself off. I noticed Bart was on his thing, and I go, "Oh, I need to get into it, have a shower. I need to, I need to wake up." I actually got outside to get
this sun,
to literally my circadian stuff. And after I did that, actually, I woke up more. I was actually half asleep still, struggling. So I had to walk out. It was funny because I was basically just in my boxer shorts and t-shirt. And I walked out. I was surprised that that Hello Kitty hadn't popped her head out and she hadn't seen me and go, "Put some clothes on," or something like that. Yeah, so yeah, pretty much.
Causing trouble early in the morning.
Yeah, exactly.
But nice to be here, Harry. I hope I can see you in another fortnight's time. And I'll
definitely. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. For you coming on. Take care.
Anyway, thanks, Harry. Stay well.
See you, Lukey.
See you, everyone.
Anyway, back to me. So we've got about nearly 2 o'clock, half an hour or 34 minutes to go. So we've pretty much covered all of that. Yeah, exactly. It's great stuff. I love it. Absolutely love it. Oops. Also heard of studies that omega-3 starvation made no difference to the animals. Of course, that's epidemic. Yeah, basically. It's just associated data. And certain animals actually can endogenously produce certain things. even, they don't have an essential fatty acid, or, it's like a number of animals can produce a certain level, like dogs, for instance, they could actually produce more taurine. So when you give the dog, as an example, you give them basically deuterium depleted water, like DDW 25, you lower their damage for that, but you've given them enough taurine to support their melatonin production and also to heal and repair the electron chain so you can restore. So this is why when they give deuterium depleted water to humans without the taurine, it doesn't work as well. And they go, I wonder why it's not working. The missing ingredient is taurine. We don't synthesize enough. That's the difference. That's why I put people on depleted deuterium protocols plus taurine. They work synergistically. But in the dogs produce quite a lot endogenously, where the cats produce hardly any. Go figure. It's just the way it is. Because dogs do not eat organ meats and stuff like that. The cats do. That's why they get it from there. They don't have to synthesize it themselves. Dogs don't, because they eat more muscle meat. They get less. But even dogs, it helps them. They still don't produce optimal, but they still produce far more than humans and way more than cats. That's the difference. And that is why when they do the dog depleted deuterium protocol, it works. Cancer recedes. They go, but they still can't figure out. The missing link is taurine. That's where my hypothesis comes in about how all this works together. Anyway, there'll be more information in that regards to that. So we've got to be very careful with rat studies or cat or other animals, because there is, while in terms of the way the mitochondria work in all mammals and practically all species on the planet, it's all the same because it was produced a very long time ago. But so at that micro level, a lot of the machinery and all that in the cell, in the mitochondria, are very similar, more or less the same. But at the macro level in the body, where you've got complex metabolic pathways, the genetics in terms of transcription factors, in terms of different nutrients or conversion pathways, the way things get converted, those are not always similar between animals. And that's why the dietary stuff is crap. And that's why some of the sort of pharmacokinetics is also wrong, because the way they metabolize certain drugs is not. That's why they do initially with animals, and then sometimes they do with humans and they fail. Oops. That animal's metabolizing it slightly different. Again, reductionist thinking gets you into trouble. So you've got to be very careful. You have to understand the difference. At the micro level, a lot of cell level and mitochondrial level, yes, we're all organism, eukaryotic. That's why they're called eukaryotic cells. We all share them, all animals and all that. But once you get into complex systems, those complex systems work differently between themselves. So that's why all my mechanistic studies, you probably notice that I do, is I look at specific pathways directly in the mitochondria, directly into the cell, to show directly these sort of things, effects. Why? Because they're going to be a lot of similarities with humans and other species. But certain pathways, they're going to be different. So you can't look at those studies. You have to ignore them and say, well, we don't really have any studies for that part, because we have it for animals, but we don't have it for humans. So, and that's where knowledge comes into play in understanding the difference between why one study is credible and applicable, in a sense, that's the better word, applicable to humans potentially, and another isn't. Because the way our body's machinery works is slightly differently transcripted and determined by slight different variations and the differences in the genes, the way these hormones and everything else works in our body compared to their body. So we've got to be very careful the way we look at studies. Anyway, Oh, well, brain fog, mental problems. There's a lot of, for children, they won't grow properly. Their brains won't grow properly. They'll have retardation, all sorts of things. So, yes, they are very essential. There's a plethora. You can Google and you'll find a plethora of symptoms for deficiency. But if you're on a carnivore diet, you're not going to have, exactly all that sort of stuff. Neurological, clotting problems, that as well. Yep, good point. Yes, it's another reason why, because Inuit consume a lot of fish. They get far more DHA, EPA. They have difficulty clotting. So, yes, it does inhibit the clotting factors in the body. To combat COVID at home, look, as long as you maintain good vitamin D status, which is important, and I usually up my taurine, between 6 and 10 grams a day when I get, for COVID. And usually I don't even get COVID. The last time that I got COVID from Dad, and the only reason I got it, even though I'd been exposed to other people with COVID on and off, never got it, and then I get it from Dad, is when I was doing my experiment. Remember, I had to cut out vitamin D and I cut out taurine so I wouldn't get confounding. And I did that experiment on my vitamin D status, if you remember. I waited for a period of time. And so I lowered my level of free vitamin D in the system. As a consequence, I made myself a bit vulnerable. And that's what happened at the time. So, yeah, it's important. And it's also, the other thing is COVID also causes immunosenescence. So what does that mean? It means that it ages and damages the immune system. Senescence means something that gets damaged, okay? The more damaged it is, the more senescent it is. So a cell, whether it's a human cell or whether it's an immune cell, like a T cell or whatever, they get damaged. They get, compromised in the way they work. They can't work properly. Their protein structures are damaged. They can't just function properly. What taurine does is actually affect the immune system in a profound way. It lowers immunosenescence. So when an immune part of the immune system or immune cells attack a virus or envelop it or whatever they do, they have different strategies or different parts of the immune system. What happens is they sustain some damage. It's like a police officer grabbing a criminal. They may get some scratches, they may get a knife cut or whatever. Well, same thing, Well, taurine's going to go there and patch them up. You're good to go, mate. So that's what it actually does. So it actually lowers immunosenescence, the damage incurred in dealing with it. So it's really important in protecting your immune system. The other thing that it does is vitamin D will actually allow for stem cells to be produced in the bone marrow to produce new naive T cells. Really important. Young people have more naive T cells. Older people have more cytokine ones. That means old, damaged, deranged. Cytokine ones are too damaged to basically deal with the disease very well. So you know what they do? They just release T cytokine cells, just release shitloads of cytokines, inflammatory markers. And because there's not enough vitamin D to regulate them, because there are receptor sites to down-regulate them, they just basically poison the body. And that's the cytokine storm is what kills you, not the virus itself. That's why older people are more vulnerable, more frail, have more immunosenescence, aged immune systems, and they are more vulnerable to cytokine storms and death. So if you want to age gracefully and not have a poor aged immune system, well, you need taurine in your diet, and it declines after the age of 65. It collapses endogenous synthesis in the body. So unless you're eating it or supplementing it, you're going to be in trouble having enough. in old age. And that plays a critical role, what you're eating. And that's where the seafood cultures like you find around the world, especially Japan, or, stuff like that, they live longer. I wonder why. Well, seafood's very high in taurine. So it's sort of the Japanese paradox in terms of COVID as well, So it's that part. So really, in order to, and then the other thing that it does is when you get the naive T cells inside your thymus, in the middle of your chest here, also it actually prevents it from remodeling. It shrinks as it gets older, can actually hold less of that part of the immune system, which is your sort of frontline defenses together with your, tonsils and stuff like that, and some of the other stuff. So, how do you support it? Yeah, that way. Also, once you've created these stems, you've produced these stem cells with vitamin D, they go up, they migrate up to the thymus, and then they need taurine to be activated. So a species-appropriate diet, as I say, sun, salt, and meat, which taurine is in meat and all that, is the way to go in terms of having a healthy body that is robust. And that's why tribal people are so robust against viruses and diseases and stuff like that, compared to even viruses that they've never met before. Like if you take a look at the North American Plain Indians, very few of them died from the introduced diseases. It was all the coastal people that were agriculturalists that all were decimated by 90%. Shows the difference. Animal-based diet keeps you alive. We're in, an environment where there's a lot of new opportunistic viruses around, like COVID, compared to when you're on a plain kibble diet. No wonder so many people are dying on their kibble munching lifestyle. Yeah, but there was also pressure in the initially they didn't. There was a lot of pressure, and obviously the price then made sense, but people didn't like the flavor. See, they'd actually already done a trial, McDonald's, and people didn't like their chips. They didn't taste the same. They were much nicer with the tallow. But it was, so they actually done some trials with vegetable oils. They were looking for cheaper prices as well, don't get me wrong. But their customers didn't really like it. They had really poor feedback, and they go, maybe it's not a good idea. Because when you've got a multi-billion business, you don't change things just rapidly. I don't know whether you're in business, but I've been in business. My parents have been in business, and I know about business. You don't change things rapidly. You'll test things. And if your customers are telling you, the other way it actually tastes better, you don't mind that if it, you may, because you want those regular customers because it's turnover. Cash flow is turnover. You need to basically keep people coming through the door. They're not coming through the door and you've got stock that's actually just sitting around not being sold, it means your costs are still, your upfront costs and operational costs are high. So you've got high operating costs in terms of electricity, in terms of power and all that, but you're not actually pushing product out at a sufficient pace to generate cash flow. So you basically can pay your bills, pay your wages, pay all that, and also garnish a certain level of profit. You're going to be concerned of taking a risk with a new product when you're already making good money with the existing stuff. It was actually more pressure from others outside that actually then made them do the switch, because then they could justify. They say, well, we're doing it for other reasons. And, they were, and since people still continued buying, they go, okay. And that's because people had already been used to buying, in the 90s and all that, people just were losing interest in making things at home. So, so they switched at the right time and it didn't affect their business adversely. So that's sort of how it sort of happened. G'day, Dom. Oh, thanks, mate. Appreciate you're in the US, mate. God, he gets around, old Dom. What does he say? The coffee sub, Harry. Thanks, mate. What's the best way to recover after kidney stone removal? Course of antibiotics. Oh, nice. Brother went through it last week. Ouch. Yeah, bloody ouch as well. So obviously you got to be very careful. I've known people sometimes having certain issues where if they've got, like a lot of circulating oxalate, a lot of circulating things that can actually create some of these stones, you can sometimes, it's rare, but it can sometimes happen where you can get again. So that's an issue. So I would be doing a bit of citrate, because you also may have little granules still in your kidneys that have not been cleared out, and citrate will just get rid of all that. So, look, a lot of people don't like food grade citric acid. Lemon juice does the same thing. So tell him to just use a bit of lemon juice and stuff like that. That will help, sort of clear out. Now, other people are concerned about taking citric acid, even food grade, for a very long period of time because of tooth enamel. You can get little tablets, so you can avoid the enamel issue altogether in that regard and get food grade rather than the powder that you dilute in water, and so it less of a problem because you can rinse your mouth out after you've drank the stuff. But if you don't want to do that, you can go for the tablet option. There's always that. So that's one issue. Obviously, if he's done a course of antibiotics and all that, I'll definitely get him on a bit of taurine, because we don't, and probably even Ruteri and some, probably kefir and stuff like that, because we want to restore some of his good bugs, healthy bugs back. Probably Ruteri is probably not really necessary, unless you've got a pathogen. But if he didn't have a pathogen before, yeah, probably give that a miss, because that would take a while to order and get in. So obviously, if you can get a kefir, that would be good to sort of, put some of the bugs back in that regard. And a bit of taurine would also help regulate all that sort of stuff. So that would keep certain bugs under control anyway, via inflammasome, regulating that path. You've seen my video probably, so you know what I'm talking about. And taurine will also help with the kidney recovery. So taurine is really important if the kidneys actually sustain some injury. I think I've done a video on kidney injury. It was in rats, but still, it's still rat kidney cells are very similar to human kidney cells. Most mammals have got very similar kidney cells. Why? Because basically we all originate, based on the genetics from these small type rodent type things. So yes, so in that regard, I would definitely get some taurine in there for the kidney injury to really improve the healing and the functioning of the nephrons. So that'd be very important, But because I don't know what your brother's doing. If he's on a mixed diet or stuff like that, just go slow. Go like 2 grams. Tell him to go 2 grams. Wait a month. And I don't know whether he's on blood pressure meds. Once you go over 2 grams, you may need to adjust your blood pressure meds, as you know. 2 grams, not a problem. You don't need to do anything. But once, I would definitely look at about 6 grams and slowly pace him 1 week, 2 weeks, 4, 3 weeks, 6, as long as he's not on blood pressure meds or lithium. So basically pace himself and then do that for about 3 months. And that should help with all the healing of the kidneys. Because we want the kidneys to work properly and heal properly. So, because kidney stones can really sometimes cause, and even the surgery can sometimes cause even additional, kidney injury. So we need to support the kidney, basically. Yeah. So. Oh, still in the GCC. I'm not sure what that is. Is that a hospital? Oh, got it. Yeah, he's on, likes broccoli, cauliflower. Oh God, really? Yeah, no. God. How can you like that crap. Anyway, each to their own. Yeah, but that's the sort of stuff that is probably, for fibrotic tissue, the best stuff is taurine, for any tissue, whether it's the heart, whether it's, anyway. Oh, you're in the Middle East. Okay. So okay. Oh, you can actually use different currents. No, whatever. I don't know how. Yeah. Or using a VPN. Anyway. So which part of the Middle East are you in at the moment? Ah, Bahrain. Okay. Ah, Gulf Council. Ah, yeah. Yeah, gotcha. Ah, yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Is that a hospital? Or is that, trying to work? Yeah, obviously. Good pronunciation. Yes. Anyway, now where was I? It's a whole lot on omega-3s. Omega-3s, I'll give them. With allergies, we've covered all that sort of stuff. There's the COVID one that I was just before, the McDonald's thing. And I covered that earlier. Yeah, if you got poor beta-carotene conversion, then yes, you should, because the matrix metalloproteinase 9 and 2 are regulated by retinol. In the lungs, more by vitamin D. There's more receptor sites, but primarily those enzymes are regulated by in the skin. But on top of that, it could be a hydration with dry skin. So you may not be getting enough niacin in your diet. So niacin, good source of niacin are piggy and also tuna. They got good sources of niacin. Or you can supplement the stock standard nicotinamide type B3 type standard supplement, and nicotinamide actually holds on to hydration in the skin and improves skin hydration. But if you've got any lesions or anything like that, anything that's sort of emerging on the skin, it also could be deranged, unregulated MMPs that are being overexpressed for whatever reason because they get all MMPs are produced in the liver, and it's usually to regulate collagen around the body. Sometimes if they're not regulated properly with fat-soluble vitamins, they can misbehave under certain physiological conditions like UV radiation, as an example. Anyway, or that, or the other one. You just sit in the bottom. Also no vitamin A in the diet, plus muscle meat, dealing with oxalate issues. Yeah, probably. Yeah, well, you could actually have an oxalate. And why don't you have vitamin A in the diet? Vitamin A is not toxic. Only in very high levels can be a problem, like vitamin D. But if you're getting around 5,000 IUs or more, there's a guy that actually did 25 eggs a day for multiple years on average and was getting 6,700, something about that, So way above what most people get in terms of vitamin A. Never had any toxicity, never any health problems. It's bullshit. Once you get over 10,000 or, really high levels like 50, 60,000, obviously at those sort of high levels, doing it continuously, yeah, there's a sort of there's a certain amount of storage in the liver that can be achieved, and a certain level of rate limiting enzymes, the amount of enzymes that can actually store it, do all the storage work. So, obviously if people consume like mega doses, like supplements, they're bound to get themselves into trouble, but most people don't. And so, John, it's not an issue. And there are people out there that are basically either pushing one extreme or the other, and they are both ridiculous and wrong. And you'll get yourself into a lot of trouble, night blindness, retinopathy, macular degeneration, all that sort of stuff, and other problems with your retina can actually happen if you're very low on vitamin A for a very long time. So don't do it. Please eat some eggs, get some vitamin A. And the oxalate thing, that can be a problem. That can, in some people, it happens in different. Other people, it hits them in the kidneys. Others, they excrete it through the bile, and they'll end up through the anus getting a lot of cuts. And you'd actually, if you put your finger down there, which anyway, I know it's disgusting, you'll feel like little glass, like a very, glass type little elements coming out. That's where that blood is coming from, and your oxalate dumping through basically your. And what you can actually do with that, if you're one of those people that oxalates through the feces, calcium is really important. So you have to up your calcium intake to bind some of that sort of stuff, so you don't get basically your colon having all these little cuts in it and bleeding. So you don't want to do that. So you want to be taking in to deal with that. Plus you want to degrade it. There are a number of, like if you do some of the bacterial strains that you can actually produce with certain types of like kefir type milk kefirs and stuff like that can really help with this as well, in improving and increasing those oxalate degrading bacterial strains, which are important to basically reduce that stuff as well. So that's another issue. And then some people get it in the skin. It's I'm one that gets it in the kidneys. Other people get in the skin, and it can be all over, even on their head and stuff like that. They can have like really rough. There's going to be like rough all over the place. They can just touch themselves and go, "Ooh, that's really rough," and it's like spiky. Yeah, that'll tell you it's coming out in the skin. So oxalate can be nasty stuff, believe me. So keep that in mind. If they ate more fish, yeah. I mean, the people like Inuit and all that, they consume far more fish, and the older people tend to, so they may have a higher requirement, So there's a lot of those little differences between populations that have adapted to certain types of eating styles that have basically made them more vulnerable to certain deficiencies in the modern world compared to others. So yeah, you have to look back a bit to realize, what did my grandparents consume? A bit more of this? Maybe I should as well. Studies already indicate L-arginine, zinc, lactoferrin, vitamin D, and ancestral food from the suns are being the best for basal defense. Yep, I would wonder if it played a role as well. It does. Definitely does. A very important role. Yeah, zinc's important. Lactoferrin, because it actually upregulates interferon in the body. So an interferon's part of the immune system. L-arginine, yes, and also helps with nitric oxide, which also helps with immune system. So because L-citrulline, when you take it as a supplement in the bloodstream, it converts to L-arginine to become then synthesize nitric oxide, vasodilation. Definitely all that sort of stuff we need to keep to a minimum or avoid. There you go. More taurine for me. It is. There's quite a few studies on taurine. I've started taking it after listening to Harry. Taurine for Harry. It's a rule for Bart. Look, for us older people, for people getting older and older, these are biohacks. Sorul basically will bring about stem cells, new cells, healthy new cells in that regard. So, so it's an option for people, depending on how damaged they are. Things that will actually also increase stem cell production are fasting, exercise, time restricted feeding has an influence. Obviously, something like Cerul will actually magnify that as a supplement. It's designed to do that, because it has that cleaving effect where it actually can cleave off I forget the protein, where it actually allows it to liberate more adult stem cells than some of the other activities would. So that's where the advantage of it. But you pay for it in that sense. Where taurine also has an influence, particularly where taurine works in terms of stem cells, while it has a bit in the peripheral, not much, Cerul's way better. In the brain, on the other hand, it's the champion. So when it comes to neuron, for stem cells, for neurons in the brain, taurine is actually the champion there in the brain against everything. And I'll argue that point for, with anyone. So, yeah. And there's plenty of research for there. But in the peripheral tissue, not as good. But in the brain tissue, taurine is basically the really important thing. And I think it's, if you want to maintain good brain functioning to old age, I think it's really important to have it in your toolkit. Drop those hypotheses on the Odyssey. Time to, yeah. Oh, you're talking about, yeah, I know. Yeah, I'd like to find out their real reason why they've taken away my playlist on COVID. I'd really like to know what their bloody reason is. So I'm annoyed. I'm really pissed off about the whole situation that they've come onto my channel, YouTube, and actually altered my channel's playlist, format and stuff like that. Anyway, calm down, Harry. Yes. Anyway, it's 2:00, guys. I'm going to pull the pin because I have to be somewhere and do something. And so I'm just trying to really quickly take a look to see whether there's really some acute thing. Yep. Yeah, you're welcome, my nature. Thanks, mate. Thanks for being here. My pregnant wife is getting a lot of advice from doctors about making sure she only eats meat cooked to well done. Okay. I'd prefer eat medium rare, important for prenatal. Exactly. Thoughts, Harry? Look, your wife's going to be influenced, Blake, by doctors. You just have to accept that. Don't argue. Don't argue. Don't antagonize her. She needs more taurine, so does a child, to grow well. Why don't you supplement her? The supplement on iHerb that I get, which is a free form. Give her some of that. There, you've solved the problem, both for your kid and for her. Thanks, Gary. You too, mate. Gary Finch. Yeah, so, yeah. Sometimes it's not worth arguing. She's going through enough stress and she's basically being ill-advised. But anyway, it's all about, potential infections, Really? I mean, taurine actually will regulate the gut microbiome so you don't have these sort of issues. But anyway, you know what it is. It's all the kibble, eating and all that. And that's what they look. They look at the average. And the average person is highly inflamed, highly unhealthy, and pre-diabetic. And even many pregnant women become diabetic. So they have all these complications. And that's why they advise all this. We don't want to, what if the mother gets another infection? And they're concerned about this, and I can understand where they're coming from, because the general public is very unhealthy. Even general public women, pregnant women, are eating too much contraindicated garbage. So, yeah, that's part of the reason why they make these recommendations. That's why even the RDIs and all the recommended stuff, the averages change all the time, because they look at the general population and say, well, if they're not dying immediately, it seems that the threshold can be, they can tolerate lower levels, and they'll put a lower level or a higher level or whatever, So it's like potassium. They keep on taking it up because of the sodium, but they don't realize it's insulin that's retaining the high sodium, but but if they're not too careful, they could push it too high, and actually, because it really, at inappropriate levels, potassium can kill. It's used to basically kill people. When they use the chemical stuff, that's potassium based, just stop the heart. So anyway, crazy world we live in. Yeah, so probably for peace of mind, go with the other option. keep yourself from, otherwise things could get dicey. Get really dicey. Can I just want to be treated by a taurine alone? Yes and no. Yes, it does suppress H. pylori. Yes, it improves acid, the proton pumps in your stomach. It actually improves their functioning, their regulation. So if they're not producing enough acid, it actually upregulates that, so they pump out more. So your basically, your pH will come down as your acidity goes up. So you're able to absorb things, but also with a higher stomach acidity, stomach acidity itself suppresses H. pylori. So we don't know whether taurine, by regulating the proton pumps, which H. pylori tries to suppress acid release from it does that. It's nasty, isn't it? That's why some people don't realize they've got a H. pylori issue when they don't have enough stomach acidity. So yeah, it can be tricky to diagnose as well. All that sort of stuff, you have to do certain things. So yeah, that. So keep that in mind. One that loves their anti-nutrients. Good for you. Anyway, Up Syndrome, how are you, mate? Well, I think we've pretty much, there's John. Good to have you here, mate. You boys are late. Gary. And I think we're basically done. And there's Sammy right at the end. And there you go. And looks like Sammy and Dom may get together. Anyway, so thanks, guys, for being here. I do appreciate it. Take care. And Scotty's there as well. G'day, Scotty. See you later as well. Hasn't come through here, so I can't put it on the screen yet. You know what? StreamYard. Too slow. Anyway, take care, everyone. I hope you like the background of Hobart. Nice place. So I usually walk all the way up through the domain and then walk through the waterfront. And sometimes at lunchtime, I'll walk through this sort of area, or I'll go down Battery Point or different parts, or up Davy Street all the way up to the top. There's some nice areas there. So it's a nice area. Anyway, hope you like it. And I am out of here. Oh, thanks, Richard. Yes, Tassie's a nice place. Anyway, see you guys. And in 4 hours, there'll be the Eurasian one, and I'll have Jonathan on. So let's try and get his subs up as well. If people haven't subscribed to Jonathan's channel, please subscribe. It's in the featured channels. So, and he'll start doing some stuff around, health and things like bodybuilding and stuff like that. He's pretty much a champion. He's been involved in that area and all that. He's had a number of health issues from a young age, and and I've talked about it with him. Other people may want to ask him questions tonight. That's fine. They can do that. Come along. I think you'll find it interesting. He's a really nice fellow. I really like John. I think he's such a nice. He's a nice fellow to basically be around. From his demeanor, he's got a nice demeanor. So yes, he's definitely not an arsehole like yours truly used to be. But anyway, I better get out of here. See yous. Take care.